biggest thing that you can get is a surprise, because that's not something you can get yourself. You can't arrange a surprise for yourself, which is the biggest luxury, essentially. We are in a simulation, and the purpose of simulation is to make us essentially we're the chosen algorithms of what's good to experience. So that's why the gambling exists, because people are not exactly just looking to get a bunch of money. They're looking for that, oh, am I gonna win today? I'm gonna lose all my savings. I was seeing that information laid out that way, I'm like, I don't see how it can come together without intelligent design. I just don't see it, because imagine the most complex construction or thing that we humans created. It doesn't come close. Like, you want to see that next interesting video. What if it's gonna be funny or interesting or informative? What if it's gonna give you the secrets to the stock market? All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello.
We're back for more deep fried stuff. And for today, I was thinking about our formula. Essentially, every episode is just another opportunity for refining and developing the formula.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I kept thinking about it, for my current stance on it, I do think we should try to do more of a Gangsta party line style. Because, and we're going to have to explain and introduce the concept, but because essentially, whenever I thought back to how those conversations go, it's the perfect flow, because we don't have any constraints. It naturally flows, right? I don't have to watch, like, nobody has to watch what we're saying. And it flows naturally. It never stalls. And that's what I want to keep doing. So essentially not constrained to any particular topic, and just and talk about what comes up.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I still have a bunch of ideas in the back pocket. But essentially the way those conversations go is that I would have something that I definitely know I have to talk to you about. But then it's not like the thing, like I call you and when we talk about it, we just start bullshitting, right? We just start like going back and forth about what's going on, and then we talk about all these things, and they naturally and organically pop up, whatever is important and pertinent at the time. So that's what I wanted to do. Just really, really relax into the process, because it's almost like an improv at that point, right?
Yeah.
That's what our convos usually are. Like, we're not preparing them. So I wanted to explore a bit of that today. So don't worry about any topics, but there will be topics. They will naturally occur in the conversation.
Okay, folks, before this podcast ever existed, what happens is that we call each other at times, and it lasts like sometimes up to like 4 hours long, and we just talk shit. And then we talk other things like politics, intellectual kind of ideas, all kinds of like spirituality, religion.
Yeah, just whatever we've been talking about on this
whatever
podcast,
we talk
right?
about. And it's funny too, because we'd be so into it, we'd talk for hours, that's what happens.
Yeah, and it becomes really interesting, we're exchanging ideas, we're exchanging information, but as joking around, so it's very unconstrained, undefined. I actually remember doing much more of that when I was in school, because back then we had regular phones essentially, right? So I would call my classmate friends, and often we would talk also for lengthy amount of times, just about whatever, right? About the school, work, homework, relationships, music, jokes, whatever. And then with time, it just became non-existent and rare. At some point really literally stopped happening at all. So until we started having those extensive conversations with you, I think, after high school, I had some in-person hangs, but outside of that, there was no party lines.
And I think this is important too, because obviously, these ideas, it needs the space to unravel, right? It needs the space to this is how ideas form. I mean, imagine back in the day, people used to have what? Between intellectual circles, they will have, I remember, I think in France back in the day, they actually have a cafe where all these like really smart science, scientists or intellectuals would mingle and they talk,
Mm.
right? They discuss different ideas and a lot of the major kind of discoveries kind of came from that environment. It's like a forum, right? People they just discuss all the major findings and kind of intellectual ideas, and that's what the Enlightenment was back in the day, where all these new ideas came about because people thought about it, they wrote it down, and they talked to other people about it. They get more data, and they're like, okay, this is cool, right? This is how these consensus are being formed. So I think just in general, right? I think that the issue with men these days, is especially, is like because the culture has such a big emphasis on being the stoic guy that somehow even these kind of activities are being frowned upon even. I know it's weird, but it does, right? People are like, oh, men should just like, nah, don't talk about stuff too much, because that's like what women do and, that's not manly or whatever, some kind of weird. And this is the problem is, I mean, we're all people. We need communication, especially for men, because we discuss all these interesting ideas and intellectual ideas as well. So it's not just chatter, more of a, this is how you exercise your intellectual capacities. Uh,
Yeah, it helps just think things through and talk things through, right? Because thinking to yourself and talking to other people, I believe they're both part of the thinking process, but there's definitely something that you're able to do with speaking to other people that you're not able to do by yourself. I for sure feel it. It's a different type of thinking through. It's actually where you have some feedback, you have some responses and some inputs that you yourself might not be able to provide to yourself.
Yeah, so that's the part about self-reflection where it's so hard to self-reflect because you don't have any, because I think we're like our perception and the brain, how the brain works is that it's a very good machine at detecting stimuli, right? So when you're by yourself, you have a lot less stimuli happening because it's all internalized and there is no, you don't
Yeah,
have
there's
a,
nothing to bounce off of, right? You don't have a
right.
perspective to you. You're too close to it. You're looking at it from zero ground. But when someone else hears what you're saying, they can see both you and the kind of situation that you're talking about. So they're able to provide you that perspective. Like, yeah, I hear you saying it, but what I see from my view is also this, this, and this. Are you aware of this, right? And most of the time, no, you're not aware of this because you obviously are not seeing yourself from that perspective.
Yeah, and the world is such a complex place. Like, we all know, like, for example, you can't predict what the stock market is going to do. And that's only the reason because it's just that it's so not just chaotic, but just that the information within the stock kind of environment, it's so unpredictable in a way that nobody can correlate the data exactly where it's going to be. So,
Exactly. And I was thinking about just the nature of market the other day because essentially at this point, I'm so fed up with it that I'm like, it's useless, dude. I'm thinking of, yeah, I'm actively trying to just wrap up all my positions, just put everything into index funds. But it's difficult because, I'm still have bias within me. There's still like some hopes that maybe you can balance it out or something. But essentially, the whole thing is so complex that yeah, you're not able to. What you're trying to do is predict reality, right? You're
yeah.
trying to like read the signs, like read the indicators and the data and represent it in different ways where you can have some kind of glimpse of like, okay, well, all these signs point toward it going this way, but you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow because because that will change everything that's happening in real time. You're never able to. It really reminds me like it's an apt metaphor for the whole of reality, because in general we would like to predict reality, right? You'd want to predict which are the winning lottery tickets and stocks, which are the better jobs, which are the better places to go to, restaurants to experience, because you only have limited time. You only want the best stuff at all possible times. So we're constantly doing this prediction. It's always running in the background. But with something even as more or less concrete as a stock market, right? It's all based on real numbers, real valuations, real business moves. It's so complex because all of it is so interconnected that you're never able to get on top of it. Because by the time you do get on top of something, it's already moved on. Like it's already the next iteration, next version of it. So it's useless. Like you're never going to be able to uh, time it essentially.
Yeah. And that's kind of the problems with our world, I guess. The reality that we live in is that there's so much data and that the brain can't comprehend as much, right? It can't comprehend all of this stuff. Or at least maybe
Yeah,
subconsciously, subconsciously, but consciously you can't really process what it means, right? All these.
it's so overwhelming, man. It's like, especially these days, I feel it with the various creative projects I have. I just constantly am aware of the limitation of time and energy and what you can do in a unit of time. The fact that if you want to read something, you need to allocate like half an hour at least for you to get into it, for you to like concentrate and for you to stay into that flow. And anytime you need to do some kind of deep work like that, that at least requires half an hour of your time, anytime anything else distracts you, your focus gets ruined. You'll lose that amount of deep thinking that you're not able to absorb as much, because it keeps vacillating. You keep getting plucked out of that focused state. It's very interesting how the consumption of information changes these days because it almost like you really have to limit a lot of it consciously. But that's not how all these information systems and social media are designed. Like they're really, I feel it time and time again, because I tried to go move away from social media a couple of years ago, but I'm feeling like I'm being sucked back into it because of how these algorithms work, because they just exploit that path of least resistance, right? It's like you want to see that next interesting video. What if it's going to be funny or interesting or
Yeah.
informative? What if it's going to give you the secrets to the stock market and maybe going to be able, it's like it pulls your strings of what you find interesting, which is actually something I was wanted to talk about just in general is kind of what do you find interesting? What constitutes what attracts your kind of attention and interest in general?
I feel like part of the mechanism for that, or the idea generally speaking, if anybody or for any person to find something interesting, it has to be something that they is information that they don't possess. It's something new that they experience, which they would find interesting, right?
So new, just novel in general, or something new and
Yeah, something
useful?
new because it doesn't even have to be useful because it's like when you learn something new, you don't have any notion what it's about. And as you're learning it, it's like, oh, the first thing you say is, oh, that's interesting,
Uh-huh.
right? Because you never learn about, oh, this thing actually exists. This thing is a thing. So you don't have any preconceived notion about it. And that's what makes it quote unquote interesting, right? It piqued your interest because you never learn about this, you didn't know about this, and now you know about it. Like you were saying about the whole social media, the doom scrolling is really about, oh, can I find something more interesting? That previous video is
Yeah, it's that
interesting. Can
novelty
I?
effect for sure. There's something about it because you notice it specifically with videos and feeds when you're watching something. Whenever you recognize that you've seen that video, like you skip it immediately, essentially, unless you really like it. And that, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a known phenomenon essentially that this novelty effect is very addictive, essentially, right?
It is. It's either it's only in two ways it happens. Either the information is gonna be so I will use the music as an example. You always are trying to find new bands, new music, right?
Yeah,
So that is that part of the process of trying to find new stuff that's engaging you because you want to, the possibility could be endless. If I want this style, I want that style mixed together,
yeah.
and maybe somebody's doing that, and you try to find them. That's the part where you seek those new experiences. But on another hand, is the earworms, where a song is so good that you can
Mm,
listen to that again and again and again and again, and you're
right.
seeking that kind of repetition as well. So you have this
Yeah, so
two
something
aspect.
that you really like
You have this
plus
two
something
aspect.
new.
One is trying to find a new stuff. Another is like, I like this so much, I'm willing to engage with it again and again. And this happens with multiple things with media. Some people watch a movie like again and again. There are people who watch Lord of the Rings every year, the full trilogy, like 9 hours something. They would do it every single year because it's become an almost ritual, right? It's a ritualistic
Right. They just
expression.
appreciate the form so much. The closest I came to being a fan of a movie like that is when I was a kid. I watched The Fifth Element.
Oh,
One
yeah,
summer, I was watching it every day. I watched it like every day for I think almost like a whole summer, just because like I liked it so much. There's like, all right, I'm gonna watch it today again, and I just kept wanting to do it.
yeah, yeah,
It was insane. Like it never happened like that with anything else. That was it. But there's something I guess that captures your attention that much because like why wouldn't it get old? You know, because these days definitely doesn't happen. Maybe because as you grow up, you'll learn that there are all kinds of things like that, right? So you're more focused on exploration of that. These days, I was thinking about how Spotify changed my consumption of music habits.
uh,
It was definitely changed it a lot because before it, you'd have to get your own music and essentially look for different forums, like explore the bands. Just lost the fan, but you still like have to manual like, all right, which ones is this one seems to be similar to this? Let's hear it out. You have to parse it and like, all right, I don't like this one's like a very manual process. But these days, because of there's this automatic playlist, discovery features in Spotify, it's an endless stream of music that you don't have to seek out for the most part, right? You can still seek out, but really you don't have to because if even if you don't, you're still gonna find a bunch of new music. So at this rate, like each year, I'm listening to thousands of new bands,
yeah.
thousands, because I have the stats, right? I can look at the stats. I look at
Mm,
them every year, and I'm like, Jesus, I'm definitely like because some of these bands, because there's so many of them, you don't even memorize which ones are called what. You know,
yeah,
I get familiar with
exactly.
some songs, and I have favorite songs, and I compile my own playlists, but music essentially stopped being about the band for me. Like I don't even know anything about these bands or who's playing what. I just like, okay, I like this sound, it goes with this playlist, and I just have my playlists, but then I don't even bother to look like who's playing it. I was like, all right, this is the song I wanted to hear, and that's it. Like I associate them more just with the sound and with the feels and with the vibe itself, and that's the only thing that matters to me. So yeah.
Yeah, so, that prospect of this kind of duality in this sense, like, okay, we have this one part of us want to seek all the new experiences. Another part is kind of we have this ritualized way of, because it makes sense, right? We have, this is why humans are complicated. We have these two forces. One is the seeking mode, seeking new stuff. Another is trying to using this ritualized idea as some sort of foundation because there's something comforting about these rituals because it creates your kind of worldview, so to speak, your boundaries about what you already have established. And another part of us wants to find new stuff. It's kind of this kind of not antagonizing forces, but basically in lockstep, where this is you're being pulled back and forth, right,
Right.
by these kind of impulses, I suppose. One impulse is like I want to find all the new stuff. I really like more, give me more potential new discoveries. But another part of it is like, hey, I'm comfortable with what I already found. I
Yeah.
wanted to build more. Like I like this, I like this.
Yeah, I've actually, yeah, because I know some people who are essentially they don't really listen to that much new music, so they just sticking with the favorite bands that they've had for years. And to me, at this point, it's kind of wild almost, like because I'm so used to listening to new music that I'm like expecting it. Like I need to listen to something new for my mental health, essentially, because it's like a feel because if I put on like I have a bunch of playlists at this point still like hundreds of thousands of songs in these playlists which I like at some point I selected them etc but I still like they get stale like so I can't keep listening to them like I put on a thing I put on this playlist that playlist and sometimes I just feel like I need something else like I'm because I'm listening to it and it doesn't do anything for me like it's almost like an art at this point for me. Like I have to match it with my mood because sometimes I'm in the mood like for this music. Sometimes I want to listen to sad music. Sometimes I
There
want
we
to
go.
listen to like something pumpy and fast paced. Sometimes very meditative. So I actually surprised myself. I think during this past year, I discovered like new type of music I liked through Spotify. One of them, like new genres essentially that I never listened before, and I don't even know how I stumbled upon them. Again, just through recommendations, I started listening to them. I don't even know what they're called, but this one genre, it's like ambient essentially, but it has this dark and meditative touch to it. So it's very like I can put it on in the background and like write or read and stuff, and it doesn't distract you, but it still provide this kind of background mood. It's very interesting. So I've been checking out that. But yeah, this novelty, there's definitely something about it's a built-in mechanism where things do get old. Like for
Mm,
sure they do.
they
And
do.
I'm sure there's variations and different people have different needs and tolerances there, but I definitely feel I need it like a lot these days. And that's why I can't tell because is this learned? Is this something you pick up because technology essentially promotes it to you, or is that something else? Is that part of growing up?
I think it's part of is both, I think. Because partly it is informed by your psychology, but partly also is brought about with technology. So it's psychology and technology. So that's the two things that combine. People have different elicit they're two different things. I think myself in the realm of music, I am actually on the other end where I tend to listen to a lot of old stuff, like
Hmm.
stuff I already like. And maybe I guess if you were to do the same thing, you will get bored real quick. But it will take me longer. I basically listen to the old stuff again and again
Hmm.
until I
But you
get
still
really
listen to a
bored.
lot of new
I,
music too, right?
I do,
Yeah.
but a lot slower, right? I
Okay.
tend to just, this kind of ritualized in this matter. Like, so you are on that spectrum where like you want more new stuff more than you want the kind of ritualized sort of thing. But for me, it's more of the latter. So that's interesting, right? Because then it means, right, exactly that our psychology, everybody is so different. They're kind of their heuristics are very different. They take things very in the way that it works for them, but might not work for other people. So the idea is more about understand yourself, even through something like this, like the music that you listen to, right? So in this sense, you are much more kind of gravitates toward the new experiences. So that informs you something about your psychology. Like that's part of your drive is that kind of seeking new. It's like a pioneer type of spirit. It's like, yeah, I want to find out all the new stuff. That kind of informs how you not just think about stuff, but also how you engage with the world. And other
Yeah,
people might
that's
have a
true.
different
It's
mode.
interesting.
So I guess for me, I like that whole coziness thing. It's like, hey, I like the stuff I already have. And that doesn't mean to say that's positive or negative. It's just kind of a way of structuring your life. And for different people, it's different, and there are people who does bungee jumpings and,
Oh yeah.
thrill seeking stuff. But for other people, they don't like it. It's like, what the hell are you doing? You're risking your life for what? To those people, that's how they live their life. That's how they want to live their life. And they accept the
Well, it's
consequences of
definitely
you
emotions.
know,
The emotions are a big thing there, right? Because new experiences elicit emotions, and maybe we want to experience new emotions, right? Like we want to see what else can be experienced. What is the extent of what you can feel in this world? So new experiences definitely connected to new emotions.
yeah.
But what is that drive for new emotions and experiences? What is that novelty that some people seek and others don't? Like, what determines that factor, I wonder?
I mean, like people keep saying, right? It all goes back to your childhood. I suppose they're right because it has a lot to do with how you're growing up, right? As a human being, it's like humans are like this. You accumulate all these experiences as you grow, but you are always informed by that experiences, so you can never escape it. That's the part where I think, for example, I think a lot of times in therapy, the therapists are trying to get across this idea um, that you have to accept what happened is what happened, right? The idea that is part of you. You cannot escape what you are. So you have to face the reality, the fact that something bad happened to you, and you must deal with it. You must be okay with it somehow. You have to face it, right? You have to come to terms with it. That's the idea. Even though some people are not ready to hear that, or they have to hear it in certain ways, and take them a longer time to get there. I'm not a therapist, so correct me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of how I interpret what therapy
Part of
ultimately
it is
is
just, yeah,
trying
it's,
to.
it's acknowledging kind of, then working on understanding and also acknowledging, accepting your feelings, your reactions. And this is where it's kind of abstract for me as well. But that's why how I understand it is that, yeah, first you just examine what happened, you accept it, like, yeah, that's happened, and you kind of get secure and safe with that acceptance. You kind of comprehend that it's past, it happened. Yes, it was maybe you can apply this judgment or that judgment to it, but essentially it happened. You can process it, you can accept it, you can label it, etc. You can do this processing to it, and in this detailed view on it, you're looking at it, you're accepting it, and then you're verbalizing your feelings. You kind of put your own story on it. I think that's how you process it. So this full vision, full view of the story, and it's feeling through it, kind of lets go of it eventually. That's how I understand
Yeah,
therapy.
and to basically, the reason I'm talking about this is that I think for me always is this overarching idea of finding the how do I explain this? It's like the trying to be meta at all times, almost.
Yeah.
Just as I was talking about the music part, the idea is that you want to find out, you want to get more informed about through your music choices, what does it say about you as a person, right? What kind of quirks is it that kind of give you that kind of impulse for say new stuff and what have you, right? Because everything is connected, right? It's not just in this sense, it's not just the music you like. It's kind of like there's something underneath that as well in terms of why do you like that certain type of genre, so to speak, right? Does it elicit some kind of
Yeah.
emotion from the past or so and it's like the idea of therapy, you're trying to come to term with the multifaceted nature of your reality, right? That is complicated, but you're trying to understand that the complexness with a sort of self-informed kind of understanding, and you're trying to weigh, okay, I'm doing this and that. Why am I doing it this way, right? Compared to other people, compared to this is why communication it matters because the more you learn about how other people process some of the phenomena that happen in the world, then you get the sense, okay, that's how other people take it. So what does that mean? Why do they see it in that way and then I don't? So in that comparison, then you get a better sense of yourself, right? So and I just think that that kind of way of analyzing yourself in such a way, it not just helps you practically, but it just kind of makes everything more. You basically are bringing all more of this unconscious or subconscious stuff onto the realm of the conscious. So you're actually making decision much better informed about making them.
So you're saying that kind of this proactive analysis about just everything you're doing, just about your
Almost
choices,
everything
decision. Well, that's ideal. Like, yeah, that's that mindfulness, right? Which also I've been gunning towards. But in practice, I find it's kind of difficult because ideally, what would be happening is that there's this extra your focus of attention is like looking at everything that is happening from this observer view. It's impossible to maintain it, right? It only comes up in these
in and
spotlights
out.
when,
Yeah.
yeah, because I try to instill it essentially in all kinds of ways. These days, what I'm trying to do, like I'm wearing my meditation beads all the time because the sensation of them being on my body, it helps me stay aware. It's like, all right, yeah,
Right.
they're there. I'm breathing and I kind of like return into the moment through sensations. But even that, like it doesn't work like that, right? Your body gets
Get used
used to
to it.
sensations. You don't
Yeah.
feel your clothes being on you, but they're on you. They're causing pressures and sensations. So it's that your attention is still selective like that. You can't really be in one position with your attention at all times. That's what's been tricky. Like attention feels more as liquid that's being poured into these various forms that it occupies whenever it lands on this or that. So this branch of attention to maintain this full mindfulness and meta awareness, I still don't know how
I
you would
just
do
feel
that.
like it's like nothing is really absolute, right? There's at least in terms of humans, like we're just
Now there's still this vacillation, right? This kind of
yeah.
cyclical.
And I just
process.
think that by having the attempt to do so,
Yeah,
to be
that
intentional,
should be enough.
that's good enough because you're kind of modulating how you, because the thing is, if you just purely go by your automatic response or go purely emotional, then you don't learn anything. Like, yes, you go through the emotions, you go through the kind of how you feel about certain things, and sometimes that can be thrilling to be in the experience itself and not be too
Right.
mentally aware. It can be enjoyable, it can be a process of bliss even, but to always live in that though, it's kind of like you don't know
Yeah.
where you're going, right? You're like, you're not
And you're
having.
not really registering it on a conscious level enough so it even forms memories, right? Because ideally, all the meaningful experiences would form memories that you can actually refer to and experience in your memories again later. It kind of reminded me of the time I used to be into track and field when I was a teenager. So I would actually train with groups of folks and with a trainer to participate in some competitions and whatnot, and running like sprints, like doing sprints was one of my big areas of focus. And doing those sprints was the weirdest experience because essentially you have to run with all your force, right? You have to
Yeah.
put every ounce of your willpower to move in your body as quickly as possible. But when you do that, like the time just disappears because like first there was a start and then you almost like don't really have a memory of the run itself, of the sprint, because you're so much concentrated on just this job of moving as fast as possible that you don't have time to pay attention to anything else. Your your mind and your consciousness is completely in the body, just moving it, because that's it. That's enough of a job that if you do it well enough, yeah, you'll run really fast. But if you're not as focused, if you're thinking about something else, it's not going to work. You're going to be like, not, you need to coordinate a lot of stuff to be able to run really quickly. So it was very interesting because every time I finished a sprint, I was like, what? What happened? It's already finished. It's a very interesting experience.
Yeah, I think defocus is definitely a great thing to strive for, and that's kind of in the modern day world is so hard to do because all these distractions, right? All these kind of
Yeah. You got to
information
secure
assaulting you.
deep works.
It's assaulting your senses, and that kind of make you lose the ability to focus and find your directions. Because sometimes, like, yeah, you just lose in the daily life, right? It's like this thing is popping up, this thing is popping up. I had to deal with this, and I had to deal with that, and then eventually you forgot the way you were trying to do it. Like your plan go awry because yeah, things do happen. But I think is that part of taking the time. It's not that you have to sit in a room, try to think about it. No, you can do it on the fly by just being a little bit meta aware of like, okay, this is
Yeah.
happening.
It's
And
definitely a habit, but it's something both you need to get familiar with, like as a concept, but then to start to implement it, like, because for sure for me it's been a journey. Like I don't, if I didn't intentionally try to do it, I don't know how it would happen. It will not happen. It's like installing a new mental habit, right? Because there are tons of mental habits, like even working with intense emotions or watching that you don't get angry or irritated. It's a form of mental habit, mental hygiene. Because if you don't do anything about it, you'll be completely impulsive, essentially. You'll be just like a leaf blown on a wind, right? You'll be like just feeling that emotion and you trigger it and you right away you express it. Whereas if you have some kind of method or working where you watch that, it's like, hey, I know the emotion can come on and I don't really necessarily want to give into it and experience it or express it. I've seen great progress in that regard because by having that focus, trying to practice that meta awareness, I've definitely had a good amount of situations where like, oh, I can see like irritation appearing, in my attention. I was like, and if that noticing wasn't there, I'd full on go into that irritation. So literally like an unconscious process, right?
right.
So you do want to practice that as much as possible, for sure, and everybody would benefit from that.
Yeah, I recall this sometimes when something kind of make me angry, like there is that impulse to just act out on it, right? You're almost like, I need somebody so that I can make disparaging comment so that I feel
Mm-hmm.
better. It's like, who's my target? Who's gonna take this shit, right?
Yeah.
But it's just gonna, but it takes some effort to just, okay, don't do that. That's not good, right?
Because
And trying
essentially,
to,
it's not. It's essentially it's rude, right? On all the levels to do it to other people, even if you want to. But so many of us do want to. It's some kind of, I don't even know what that is. Some kind of drive.
and yeah, go ahead.
I still enter those situations on internet very rarely, essentially. But every once in a while, I encounter a person who just becomes like they get rude like on purpose, and you could see it. Right? They start essentially. I'm interested in discussing ideas, right? But they would jump to like a personal stuff. They would like disregard the ideas, and it was like, no, you're a moron. Like you don't know things. Like, and they just attack your
Right.
personality. And I'm like,
Personal attack.
what like, and this is so unnecessary and useless to me. But every once in a while, like I notice if I am in a state where I am not as resourceful, I would get really triggers. Like I'll feel like I need to defend myself in front of this random internet stranger. And
Yeah.
but if I'm in a resourceful state, I'm like I'll dismiss it entirely and just will not talk to that
Yeah.
person. Right? It's funny that it's still that mechanism is still there, where like I have to justify myself. But most of the time, I do it because I'm interested in like actually seeing if am I wrong in something here. That do I? So I'm just asking clarifying questions. So more or less, I'm good these days. So I usually just ignore the personal attacks and I just attack their arguments and points and like ask them to clarify them. And if I see that the person just like they're not engaging with the arguments, it means that they're not interested in essentially discussing ideas. They're there to literally engage in this polemics, right? That they just want to attack you and they want to play. Essentially, it's ego play, right? You're playing like, no, you suck, I rule. Like, it's
Yeah.
boring. It's not doing
But
anything
that's
for
the
me.
thing about internet. It's just, everybody's anonymous, or at least these comments online are
Yeah,
anonymous, so they could just do whatever they like. So that's the part of that psychology, why it happens online, why online discourse is such inflammatory, such a basically like really like it really is not a good place, right? Only because that aspect of anonymity really gives this kind of the people kind of the opportunity to be like that, because in real life they couldn't be like that, right? You're gonna get punched in the face or something like that, right? So because they give them this freedom to just say whatever they like, and they let their kind of worst impulse happen, where there's no control over, they can just be as egotistical as whatever, you know, kind of what have you, then get away with it essentially, right? That's why they're trolls. They're trolls online, right? This is as a aspect of expressing a certain type of psychology online. So that's why, yeah, when it comes to online, it's just kind of forget about it. Like it's just laugh it off, and it's not really worth engaging in unless it's kind of constructive, right? If because obviously you can have a constructive conversation online, it's when that happens, but certainly some people, they they either willfully engage in that kind of inflammatory behavior, or it's just like somehow that mode of communication just kind of leads to that sort of
yeah, and you can kind of if you join the right spaces where there's already a good culture, usually that's not a problem. It's rare. So if anything, I'm really not used to that anymore because I only participate, in mostly some subreddits where there's generally like a good enough communication culture established. But because it's not moderated to a perfect degree, there's still all kinds of people
yeah
there, right? And you don't know, you don't know who you're talking to. It could be a 10-year-old child for all you know.
yeah
Usually that type of stuff would be obvious. I actually encountered something like that recently. There's this one spiritual community I was talking in, which is it's a closed community, Russian speaking, but so there's a certain level of discourse that more or less everybody engages in, where there's never really an open fighting or discussion or argumentation about something, but it's
uh-huh.
more of an exploration. So if somebody says something and then they don't agree with it, they're more like explore. They ask questions. They're like we're just interested in understanding where the person is coming from. But every once in a while, you get a new guy, right, and join, and
Go.
and they and they just like
Yeah
And they're like, no, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. And that, I realized, to me and everybody else really, is a telltale sign of essentially spiritual, a person not being spiritually developed. Because if you've gotten familiarized with these ideas for a while, you understand the breadth of experiences, of perspectives, of paths, and you really start getting an idea that, well, how are we going to find a single, even objective truth among all of this? If even to something like enlightenment, many ways lead to it. Like a lot of people are saying, like, yeah, the final enlightenment may be the same thing, but the paths, there's just thousands of them essentially. You can get enlightened by just watching anime in your basement for 40 years. That's the way, it will happen that way. So when you realize that truth is a very nebulous concept, and then you experience this a guy come in and is like, yo, I know the ultimate truth. You ain't shit. You don't know nothing, guys. You quickly realize, oh, this must be a very young person who doesn't know anything yet. So some of these conversations, like, you really understand quickly who you're talking to just because of that, because they haven't had all these conversations for 10 plus years yet. Because once you have them, you realize, like, well, yeah, you can't really put just your experience above everybody else's and call that truth. It doesn't really work that way.
Yeah, and also, the reason why we have midlife crisis and among
Mm-hmm.
all the other things is that, well, while you are young, you tend to be certain, right? You tend to be
Yeah.
like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I know why I want. I know this and that. Whereas you're very much kind of in the spirit of like, I have time to figure it out. I'm okay. I'm like this and that, right? But then
Yeah, you
eventually
have a
you,
very limited and thus skewed view of the world and how things work, etc. The other day, I was browsing through my journal that I started, I think, more than 20 years ago at this point. So I had an
huh?
online journal that I was leading. So literally, some of the entries, like when I was a child, right, like as a teenager, and my God, the cringe, dude. The
I can't
cringe
do it.
is just, it's like, because, and
I
you'll
remember.
never see it, right? From that perspective, you think
You
you're
know what
it.
you know what happened? Like I tried to, because this is this is a blast from the past, man. Like people of our age will remember, right? We have
Hmm.
used to have what was that, MySpace, or
Oh, yeah.
something
It
similar
was a
like that.
blip, yeah.
Man, I remember I was reading some of the old stuff that I wrote, and my reaction is immediately rise up from my chair and walk away. That's literally my reaction. It's like,
Nope.
God damn it.
Yeah, what is that? What
It's
is that
the cringe,
cringiness?
the cringe. Oh, you can't take it. It's like, oh my God.
Who the hell did you think you were at that point?
Right? So that means basically as a kid, as a young person, all your sights are like this. You're on blinders. Like this is how I see things, and you
There's
miss
also
so
some
much.
kind of just arrogance. There's definitely
Right.
an arrogance,
Yeah.
especially in teenagers, that where, like, I mean, it's a studied psychological thing at this point, I'm sure, where you definitely feel like the world ain't shit and you can figure everything out yourself, and you know everything best. It's very strange how you're so delusional so early on. Like, what fosters that exactly? I
But
don't really know.
but I feel like it's part of I think this is kind of the survival mechanism. Because without ego, you would not have a sense of the world. This is like, quick fashion. You want to kind of construct a world in which you can be an agent. You can act according to certain
But you're
criteria.
essentially delusional at that
But
level of
yes,
ego.
but imagine, right? Imagine if you're born having this sort of mature, well, imagine without the ego. If everything is uncertain, if everything is just like, we don't know about this and that, then you are lost. You're like, how do I go about life? You don't know. Because when you have midlife crisis, for example, you're like, okay, I used to know where I stand, but now that I don't. So I had to figure it out. But you had the prior knowledge of all the experiences of life. But imagine if you're born and had this conceived notion of, well, I don't know anything, and truth can be anything, and anything can go. You basically panic. You're like, how am I supposed to figure things out? I feel like this is kind of a natural response, evolutionary or not, I don't know. But the fact that we have this ego is to help us get around, even if even if it is delusional, it still give you a sense of sort of kind of concreteness, so that you can act out in the world in a certain way to ensure you can survive, right? Or you can be at least have a direction. Because otherwise, you'll be like, well, I don't know at all. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm even it is about. Then you have no direction. But imagine if even like we're saying, right? Teenagers, they're like full of themselves, but they're able to go out into the world and essentially be taught by the world. Okay, you better tamp that down, right? This is the real world. So you learn through that process.
Yeah, all these boundaries that we learn as when a child grows up, what parents are supposed to do is essentially teach them about these boundaries of what they can expect from others, what can they expect from the world and other people, and what's not reasonable. And that's, I mean, it's a balance, right? It's not like a exact thing because certain people, it's a certain skill set when you learn to push boundaries, because this is one of the legitimate ways for you to get results in certain engagements. So what exactly, where your boundaries, how you set it, like what's the ethics of it, it's very all flexible. It's not exactly set in stone type of situation.
Yeah, so as a infant, right? Like it's essentially your ego is so big, like it basically encompasses the entire kind of visible world that the infant is situated in. Because as psychologists kind of postulate, infant, what it does is cry. I want food when I'm hungry. I want warmth when so it's complaining to the world like my needs need to be met. All right. You have to help. You have to come to my rescue. You gotta help me, because I'm the most important. Not that they constantly know about that, but that's kind of how the mechanism it kind of works. A child has no notion other than me. I'm an entity. I'm separate from everything else. I'm different from everything else. I mean, they might not understand that, but it's kind of how they propagate naturally, right, themselves. And of course, the parents would nurture them, raise them, like you're saying, exactly, teaching them about the real world. So basically, that ego becomes less and less, at least to a point of, okay, I understand how I need to behave. Eventually, they understand how to behave with other people to fit into society, meaning that the ego has to be tempered. It can't just be this infinite, just like, I want everything catered to me type of impulse.
You know what? My problem with understanding ego is that I'm trying to essentially visualize what it is, and I don't know what it
I
is,
don't
right?
think you can visualize
So,
that.
but what is it exactly when you say your ego and you're moving its boundaries? So
Or
what exactly are we talking
the
about?
idea that this self-identity, maybe self-identity, this idea that I am an entity is,
So it's your
so maybe
your
not
view
ego.
of
That word is not,
yourself, right?
yeah, so maybe that's not the right word.
It's kind of like a mental model, right? That you hold
Yes,
about what you are, what your role and abilities are in the world, what you deserve, I guess, right? What you were expecting from others in terms of how they treat you, what you're owed. So it's kind of like a mental model then. You could say ego
yes.
is a worldview and a self view.
Because see, kids, or at least even infants, they don't have the notion of I am part of everything, right? They don't have the
Yeah, it's kind of like
notion that
everything
like,
is for them, right?
yeah,
The
like
world
I'm
is there
different.
for them.
I'm a separate entity. Even without the brain capacity to understand what that is, they're naturally, instinctually are like, I am
Right.
separate from everything
Yeah.
else. I feel this, I feel cold, or I feel this, and I'm gonna cry about it because, hey, this is not good. I don't like this. I don't, So is that part of like, that's why kids are very curious. Like they want to learn everything about the world. But that means they already have an innate, as they were born, this sense of self-identity. Like I am this thing, I'm an entity, I'm different from all this stuff. I can recognize these things are not me, right? Or at least I think that's how. I, again, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not sure, but this is kind of at least how I understand it. Is that this self-identity is kind of primal and sort of what leads us. It's like the basic mechanism for ensure that we can survive, right? Because if you don't form these kind of identifying differences between you and the environment, then you're done, right? Imagine the typical idea that, okay, if you don't recognize a tiger, what that looks like, well, you're gonna be food. So it's that kind of like, and again, this might help us survive, but it creates all these biases, right? Because especially now, because in ancient past, like life are relatively simple, also brutal as well, but it's simple. Don't get eaten, survive, get food, get shelter, and procreate. That's it. There's no other concerns other than just do that, right? But now that humans have created technologies and everything, and we have more time on our hands, you start thinking about, okay, why am I having this kind of, why do I identify myself in this way? And
Yeah,
why,
the reality expanded so much that you essentially now have so much choice, right? You have
and
so many
time.
opportunities and time, yeah, and just to engage in, to explore, to understand, okay, how do I fit in into any of this? Do I want to participate into any of these realities, right? Because there's so many aspects of it that you for sure you only have a certain amount of time and energy, as we already talked about, so you can't engage in all of them too. It's also interesting to think about how what you pick and how you pick it, differs from person to person. Some person likes traveling so much, they do it several times a year and they do go to new places. And even just that, you can do your whole life and you'll never run out of places because the planet is so big that you won't be able to visit all the places. So how crazy is that? And that's just traveling. But then even within that, there's so much cultural exploration. There's so many languages you can learn, cultures you can try, people you can talk to, art you can experience. It's endless, right? But again, you can't experience all of it. So you're going to have to gravitate towards some things.
I think this is the current, the paradigm right now is that the human society had to come to terms with the fact that right now, for modern people, we have a problem of the paradox of choice. We're now entering this era where we have more choices than what we know how to deal with. So
Mhm.
psychologically speaking, the mode is different now. Back in the ancient past, it's a one mode where it's just survive, right? But now that as through history we develop more of our civilization, we got to a point where the technologies that we create are I just say artificially creating different realities now for us that we had to deal with this psychologically. It's no longer scarcity in the sense that at least to our ancient brain, this is not computing. It's like, yeah, this is not how our the environment used to be for tens of thousands of years. We didn't evolve like this.
Yeah, and a lot of the cases you didn't really have much choice. Even, for example, our parents, right? Our parents' era, the
But
choice
what
was
simple?
especially if you lived in some small place, some village or town.
Yeah,
Like my parents, there's only one like institute in town, so no choice there, right? So you could just go there, easy.
yeah,
And then even there, you don't have that many disciplines at that time. Like it's not that much because the times dictate what necessitates, right? Like what needs to happen. Like if you have the choices, oh, you can learn English or German, that's your choice because that's what was available. There were
yeah.
nobody else going to teach you nothing else. It becomes easy because you don't get endless choices right now. If you get lost in choices on a regular basis, on everyday basis, all the flavors, all the genres and types,
Yeah.
and you have to like, it's a mental load to parse through all of that.
So that's what we have to deal with because this is more, I think I hear there's some, there got to be some stats out there, but it's saying, we're suffering from mental health problems than ever before because it's just, yeah, people can't compute with this. It's like, no, this is not how our brain are used to evolve. Like, this is not, it used to be very simple. Like I said, right? It's not that complicated in concept how you will go about your life. But now it's like, wow, there's all kinds of things, and we're creating new realities, right? Like with AI, with all this future new kind of AI technology that can
I'm
do a lot
thinking
of
that
different things.
AI technology is essentially kind of a natural outcome of that because it needs to collapse back the options and choices. It needs to do the choosing, I think, for us at this point because it's such a mentally taxing process that something needs to, it's an algorithm that essentially somehow will optimize the choosing for us. where it will have to be good enough and we'll rely on it. Because the alternative is that what you're gonna do the research yourself and mentally like examine each option and choose something. We don't have time for that anymore. I noticed the effect of that on some of the art I was experimenting with using AI. For example, I was making that music with AI, right? And the process is very interesting in itself because you essentially through language you get to create various parameters of music that you want to contain and you want to shape in a certain way, right? But even that, how much do you want to engage in that to produce like a track you like? Because you can create 100 iterations of it and tweak something in each one, right? But do you want to do that? Do you want to spend a day making 100 iterations straight for a specific track? Because how do you gauge if it's good enough, you know? So that's why I encountered it, and I started thinking, okay, how do I what's the optimal version of this process where at the end of it, I generate music that I love, right? Like, ooh, this is awesome. I say it's 10 out of 10. And I realized that the process for that, it's not exactly in more number of iterations, the better. I found out in a lot of cases where fewer was better. So the earlier iterations, I ended up going back to them and choosing them as the better ones, even after I spent a good amount of time tweaking them and trying to iterate on them in certain cases. And what I notice is that definitely the quality of your attention matters in how much you appreciate a thing. Because in certain cases, it just took me time to, you can kind of experience it with if your favorite band releases a new album, and sometimes it doesn't sound good. It's like, this is not them. It's like they lost their style. But then you listen to it several more times and you kind of get it and you appreciate it. And I experienced the same with making music like that, because I realized that, especially with music specifically, I think, if you get like the gist of what it's trying to be, that specific iteration of music, then you can kind of appreciate it for what it is. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it very well, but it kind of, if it captures the right vibe for you in a clear, consistent enough way, then I consider that's a good, successful track, because it's consistent, it's trying to do one thing, and it's doing it kind of coherently. So it's kind of this resonance with a single idea at the core that I consider, oh, this is a good piece of music, I like it. And that, and that means that there's something about, it tells me that there's something about the quality of your attention that determines how much you appreciate a thing. Because I think this is why my music taste grew and expanded so much with years as well, because I just started being more attentive to kind of the art you experience. You really look at it and you try to appreciate it more. You look at, okay, what did people do with this shape and form to make it impressive and special? And you start noticing things. You start noticing all these details, all these little strokes that are just making this picture. So it's not exactly like the quality that way is essentially you're recognizing their level of attention that they put into the thing. It's enough of details that come together in this cohesive concert. That's what's impressive about it. I started thinking about art more that way. It's just appreciation of how much attention somebody put into a thing. Not exactly the form itself, because these days I listen to all kinds of music and it's all different, but I find things that I appreciate in all these different genres.
Yeah, and that's part of it. Why, like personally, I am kind of concerned with the AI in terms of when it comes to creative stuff, because it's like, okay, well, then how do you define what is art then? If a machine can create the same sets of parameters that a normal artist can create, and sometimes they're kind of very hard to distinguish, right? Like it's like, okay, the AI stuff can create something which you would be
It
mistakenly.
followed the same formula and form, right? Where it's like, okay, it has all the elements of an actual same art form, right? Yeah, that's a question. Like, what do we consider art at that point?
Yeah, and then sometimes you can recognize the certain thing are created by AI because they have a certain quality about it where it's like it's lacking something, right? It's like, oh, that's not right. This is sounds like yeah, it has all the elements, but then it's like something's missing.
Yeah, it sounds inorganic. It misses a certain natural rhythms and
Yeah.
patterns. Yeah, for
So
sure.
that's the human element. And then it puts the question, okay, what is art then? If a machine can create it that virtually indistinguishable then from a human hand, then what does that mean? Right? Like what's the value of art then? Right? It's like if AI can create it, if we can just put some prompts and then boom, it's generated. What about artistry? What about the time that a person learns about the craft to do it, right? I mean, I get it. Certain things AI are great at. They can solve efficiency problems. Certainly increase the quickly we can do some things. But I don't know. Hard to say when it comes to art because it's like it's not about how quickly you can do it, right? It's about the intention behind the art and how what you want to express
Yeah,
through it, right?
this is a great topic. Yeah, I also wanted to talk about that because like I've been experimenting with visual or AR art as well. Yeah, and I was thinking about that. Like, what, for example, what would be the difference if you were able to produce a great work of art with AI in minutes versus somebody who took decades to develop that skill and perform it and express it, right? If it's a human doing it, it's an art of expression. They're taking the experiences, they're taking their ideas, they're taking form, they baking in all the time and physical effort that they have to go through to distill it into reality. So it's value just from all of that alone. But if you're able to produce the same quality of artwork that is also able to express all the same things as well in a few minutes, what does that change? Because the mastery now shifts towards you being able to explain what you want to express to the machine, but that's only one part of the creative process, right? The biggest part you would think was execution of the form, that you actually putting it into form using all these different media. And now that becomes a moot point essentially. But that's where like where's the artistry then, right? Is it like your imagination about the ideas is only one part of it, but execution seems to be a separate thing now, where before they were completely intertwined, right? Because as you are making art, the shape kind of evolves into what it is. But now the process of creating the shape kind of disappears because you just type in the stuff into the prompt.
I think it has to do something with the entire process of art creation, where the artists are making the decisions every step of the way.
Right.
But when it comes to AI, that is taking the human equation out of it, where
Yeah. Yeah. Good
where
point.
the artist is not making all the decision along the way from
Yeah.
first
To
starting the
make to the
work to
final.
completion. That missing aspect is like, well, is that really what the artist intended? If the AI machine can create the result, did he completely want it that way? As opposed to,
Yes, exactly. This is what I felt in some of these artwork, especially when you do it a bunch of times. You kind of get used to that process, and at certain point, essentially you stop noticing because you get an output, and then you have your judgment of it, right? You can say, I like it, this is good, or this is kind of close enough to what I'd create, but this is where it's essentially an illusion because yes, this machine created it, and now you're just choosing to kind of appropriate it
right,
to you, which is this is where I also it's interesting. You trip up because from one standpoint, this art wouldn't exist without you. That's an interesting point, right? In that exact shape, in that exact form, even though it's a tool, everybody has access to this AI tool. No two people can create the same thing because what originated and got put into prompt, that seed is different. And at this point, I've been experimenting with these LLMs because I can use some pretty wacky language to depict certain ideas, and I noticed that when I really go to town with some of these wacky ideas, I get really interesting results. Like some of the artworks that get popped out, they look so trippy that I'm like, I kind of like this. Like this is what I wanted to go for, but part of the reason I'm doing it is because I want to see what it will translate this almost nonsense kind of gibberish,
Right.
because some of these combinations of words I'm using, they're nonsensical. They're like, they don't go together. It's kind of like saying things like gelatinous sky or something, right? It's not a thing. It doesn't go together. But it doesn't have a choice. It has to interpret what you could possibly
Yeah.
mean by that, and seeing how it combines these meanings and this gradients of judgment and qualities. It's trippy, dude. So that in itself is a separate form of art at this point, I think. But essentially, how I think about it is that AI art is a separate category of art. It's still art because it definitely is a creative process. You can iterate and you can use a combination of tools and things. But yes, because there's a certain subset of the creative process is removed from you, it's a different type of art. It's a different form of art.
Yeah, it's like the idea of if you try to sell a bag that's handmade, completely 100% handmade versus something machine process, right? The handmade one sells for more dollars because the effort is put into it, right?
Yes.
That's part of the value that is being, people are like, oh, this is
And as
handmade.
a result, kind of quality, right? Because the human attention was there every step of the way to make sure everything is intentional, everything is designed, and everything is purposeful towards so the final execution all comes out from these correct decisions that were coming together toward this one final form. So it's perfect, right? But if we're not there to supervise every such of those decisions, we're just relying on the algorithm to kind of get us, right? This is where the LLMs are supposed. This is how we gauge their quality. Is that, does it understand what you actually want? So in a final form of these AIs and LLMs, I think what it will have to be is essentially be able to read our mind completely, right? Because it's the translation of meaning problem. The same way that we're translating meaning into language, into words, it's the same problem of us like translating that meaning into machine language. It's a spiritual problem, if anything, because if we solved it on a human communication level, even that would be already solve all kinds of problems in the world, because it's all about miscommunication, I think.
And
A lot of the
that's the
problems.
part of the human life cycle, basically, right? The idea that we're born and we learn and we develop. Imagine if you take the time consideration out of the equation, so to speak, where that you no longer have this. Again, basically, if you're immortal, right? If you have all the time in the world, like what you actually will do, right? It's like that changes the whole thing. Like we are in this life cycle because we recognize the value of time. Like we don't have forever, so you kind of have to contextualize everything against that. And obviously, it's more valuable. Let's just say if an artist took 10 years to hone his craft and make these arts, that's the actual time that he actually spent, right? It's like the
Yeah.
valuable time that he could have used that time doing anything else, but he chose to do
Yes.
this. And anything he created, if he's being celebrated for his art, then yes, people recognize that's part of the value that he provides because he sacrificed all that time for this,
Yeah.
as opposed to like, oh, this is easy stuff. Like, I can just do this, like, boom, magic, done. Like, what's the value of just this? As opposed to like, if I spent the time doing the whole thing.
It reminds me of this painter that I heard about. I don't remember his name, but essentially he spent his whole life painting numbers. Have you
Uh,
heard about that?
oh, is that the one that is? I think so. Yeah, I think
He was
he painted that
painting
whole
just so all of the canvases, he was just painting numbers of, I
different
guess,
shades, right?
yeah, in different shades of the time that
If
he
one
spent
was a
on it or
picture.
something, and he would just be doing the same thing. But when you look at it as his life, as he spent his life doing it, it does become an artwork at that point, because at the end, conceptually, especially when he was getting old and he was essentially getting ready to die, he started making the numbers more faint and more faint and more faint,
Right.
and
I
the
remember that
whole
one.
body of art, it becomes this, yeah, becomes this uh, painting of the time that he spent painting away into, until he dies, essentially.
Yeah. life is complicated, right? It's all kinds of stuff we got to deal with, all sort of stimuli assaulting you, and you just have to figure out what your life is about, right? That's the life experience. So it's kind of, you have to make the decision. Like we're talking about the arts, right? Like some artists are just choosing this is the way they want to spend his time. He's want to express it in this way, and that's the choice, and that's the life. And I think for a lot of us, like we really don't know. For those that know, like that's a huge bonus when a person consciously know what they want, at least even just the intention. But for many of us, it's kind of like, well, we have to kind of figure it out along the way. And even then, it's like an imperfect choice. But that's how it is.
Yeah, this question, like it's a really great arc of time plus what will you choose, because I feel like time then definitely makes sense as this mechanism of reality because it forces you to choose and prioritize. It forces you to create this hierarchy of some things are better than others. And this is why I often get a sensation that we are in a simulation, and the purpose of simulation is to make us essentially we're the chosen algorithms of what's good to experience.
Right.
Because if you think about it, that's what we're actively doing, right? We want to experience cool stuff and we want to avoid not so cool stuff. And this process is both conscious and subconscious in some way. But if you start thinking about it, this is where I get philosophical on that right away because yeah, if you don't have time as a constraint, what do you start what do you value then? What will you explore first? And whenever I start thinking about it, I immediately go back to Alan Watts because he taught me essentially that I agree with it completely, that the biggest thing that you can get is a surprise, because that's not something you can get yourself. You can't arrange a surprise for yourself, which is the biggest luxury essentially. Because if everything, he pretty much describes it that way. If you were omnipowerful, omnipresent, etc., it will be boring essentially, right?
Yeah.
Imagine knowing everything and being able to do everything right away. There is no anticipation, there's no doubt. You think and it is like that. You know how everything happens and when it's going to happen, and as soon you think about it, it happens. There's no unexpectedness, right? Everything is known, and I think there's a certain boredom in it. It is an ultimate boredom because when you know how everything happens, I think we talked a bit about this before, like in games. If a game is so easy for you that you can see how it's gonna unfold, it's boring immediately. Like if you put a game on a low difficulty and it's like, all right, yeah, the thing is gonna jump out, I'm gonna shoot it in the face, it's gonna die, nothing's gonna happen, right? It's so the predictability, it's connected with boredom, and it's generally we don't want that. We do want some level of unpredictability. Am I gonna win this? Right? That's why the gambling exists, because people are not exactly just looking to get a bunch of money. They're looking for that. Oh, am I gonna win today? I'm gonna lose all my savings.
Higher the stake, the more
What is
thrill
it
it
gonna be?
is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I just think that problem is really that of course we all have these fantasies of how we want our life to be and how it's gonna unfold. But the problem is sometimes is that really going back to that old saying, no pain, no gain. And sometimes without these tribulations, your life becomes meaningless, right? If everything is just a
Yeah,
smooth
because you
sailing
put
from
something as a stake, right? You're staking something of your own or of what you have, which is time, energy, etc. And that kind of makes it meaningful just by the fact that you're spending your resource, right? It's kind of like it's a driving force in the economy in general. So, the same way, I do believe there's some kind of spiritual economy going on that way, where it's an exchange. It's an exchange of your energy, time, and all these finite resources towards kind of what you choose. So your choice by default becomes meaningful that way because you're willing to stake these finite resources that you have in exchange for a certain experience or a certain potentiality, you know?
yeah, and that's the choice that you have to make, right? Because I think a lot of people have this tendency, and we all do, to daydream about certain things. Like, oh, I want this to happen. This will be nice if it happens.
Yeah.
But then they're not putting in the work to get to that. Then it's just dreaming, right? It's a whole just fantasy, right? And I think what actually is more meaningful is actually your real life. The struggle that you have, the problem that that you're dealing with informs that's really just life. It's just, it becomes much more meaningful for you when you actually can think back to these trial and tribulation and how you overcame them.
Hmm.
It's the same as like if you play a game, when it's challenging, then when you win at the end, it's like, wow, it feels great. This is like, yeah, this was really hard, but then I did it. I think life is like that, basically. Like they say, right? Life is a series of games, and it's true. It's the kind of objective you set for yourself and some problem you had to deal with, and you got to overcome these issues. At the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about this. How do you know yourself, right?
Uh,
You don't, because you need to have other people kind of tell you how good or bad you are, because that's a reflection. This is why there's a standard. Even in arts, yes, there are no set standard, but there is an aspect of, if you watch any of these kind of, Got Talent, America Got Talent, or whatever, whichever country, there's a judge. Somebody who have enough experience in that field would judge you how good or how bad you are. And it's valid. You can't just say, well, that's just your opinion, man. No. These
no, because
people
they've
have
seen
done the thing.
the breadth of options, right, of possibilities. They've seen people who are
Yeah.
able to hold perfect notes with perfect timing and everything, and people who are not able to do that, and they just don't compare.
See, some people have talents. They have a natural, affinity or capacity for
Yeah,
certain
you
things.
just
And
you
that just
just
means that,
have it.
yeah, and yeah, the other thing I remember, I was learning about, I just heard about this thing they were talking about, the brain plasticity, where,
Plasticity,
as
yeah.
a kid, yeah, as a kid, it's kind of like you're in exploration mode where
Mm.
everything are novel to you because you're trying to build these pathways in your brain. And then eventually it becomes use it or lose it. So before it was trying to expand to all kinds of fields, all kinds of experiences, all kind of what you call that. This is the learning process, right? A kid can learn very fast because they are using all their neural networking to just get to everything. But obviously some stuff shows better for certain kids, right? They have an affinity for certain things. So that's kind of what it grows. And your natural tendency gravitates toward that. And that's where you build your strongest connections
Yeah.
neurologically. But eventually is use it or lose it. So all the other parts, the brain figure, okay, you're not using that at that skill, or
Mm.
using that,
So
so
it can
just chalk
atrophy.
it off. Yeah, this is why, you know, if you play music, you have to constantly play it. You have to constantly practicing because it's not gonna keep up if you don't do it, right?
Yeah, because it's a specific region in the brain that's going to be responsible for it. So it's kind of like specialization, right? It will build and allocate a certain room for that. Regarding
Yeah.
these native skills that we get, I just saw a video about this randomly about a guy from India who sent in some random letter to some scientists, I think, with some solution to an impossible problem or something, and like he got it right, so he got invited essentially to travel to US to study somewhere, but essentially the kid was a prodigy, so he had some kind of affinity for math, which I realized, like, oh yeah, it is a kind of like a faculty and a certain type of intellect essentially, but the fact that you can have like affinity for it where you can just naturally be good at math, I never thought about it that way for some reason. But what does that mean about just the nature of math and what kind of intelligence allows you to be better at math? It's crazy.
Some people can dream, somehow they visualize math. Like,
Hmm.
this is what I'm not good at because I can't visualize shit math wise. When it comes to number, it's just this nebulous thing for me. But some people can just visualize all the equations basically, and then they can solve the thing. And there
It's
was
like
a story
they see
about
the
the,
connections between the numbers and different functions. It's like it's a
yeah,
language. Really, it's a type of language.
yeah. I remember there was that Indian kid. He's from some village, and
I think that's the
somehow
one I'm talking about.
right, like, yeah, and then the guy from Cambridge, I guess they were able to communicate, or I guess they learned that he's kind of dream about this the solution to an
Yes, yeah, that's the
unsolvable
one.
equation or something, and then he sent it over, and it's like the guy was looking at it, like, wow, like, this is, yeah, this, but this kid is just some
Yeah, what is that?
Maybe you're right. Like this is an simulation, like some people are just
Yeah,
better
this is why
simulate
I'm
the,
fascinated by math because it seems to be so fundamental to everything. The fact that we can have people, and I think that same guy, I think he said that he's seen either part or the whole solution of this in his dreams or something.
right, right.
Which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
again, well, like, what do you mean? Like, I've never experienced math in my dreams. You
Dream.
know, I don't even know what that would look like. To me, like I'm good at math. I think that was my strongest subject in school. I tried to study physics and chemistry as well. I couldn't get those. Those were too difficult because many more dimensions. But numbers were okay. Numbers and functions and calculus was okay for me. But it was more about just kind of memorization of these rules. And I was just,
Yeah.
okay, I understand this is converts to this and this is how it works. It's just memorizing the rules. But I don't really have a sense for like the language of it. And because the guy like that, like the prodigy like that, he sounds like inspired by it. He sounds like both fascinated and inspired by the process where somehow it's meaningful for him, right? It makes sense. There's some kind of something happening with the math. To me,
Yeah.
like I don't care. It's just some numbers changing sides and conversions. And
It reminded me of, I remember learning about chemistry in high school, and there was one point I did get it.
hmm,
I almost had this kind of no, I don't know why, it's just a feeling. It was like,
hmm,
oh, I finally got it.
clicked, right?
Yeah, you're like, okay, makes sense. But what part makes sense? 'Cause this is the whole field of chemistry. There's a whole bunch of different things going on with it, right? But for some reason, I had that distinct feeling. It's like, okay, I got it. It clicked. Like, okay, I guess the gist of the,
How the whole
even though
system
even though
works.
I can't explain what that even is because there's too many parts, right? But somehow I had this kind of, it was thrilling. Like, wow, I actually understood it, right? But it's fading though. It's just temporary, and then it's gone. It's like, oh,
Yeah, you have
now
to keep digging.
I'm back to this square one, right? But maybe just that connection just made sense all of a sudden. All these separate parts kind of feeding into this kind of a bigger piece. And I had the same feeling when I was learning about biology too. I was taking college level classes in high school. It was hard, right? But just I was just amazed at the level of intricacies and details when you drill
Right.
down to it, of all these biological cycles about the cell and within the cell and what they do with all these energy,
Yeah.
distribution and things like that. It's like, wow, like this is how it works. Like this is, we figured it out, right? Scientists figured out this the whole
Yeah.
process, how the
To
body
look
works,
into
that
all
every
the
single,
systems that are involved.
right. So, and I can see, like, right, if you want to get into the field of that, it's like, it's a complex, you need
There's
to
so
take
much to
years
learn,
to
man. There's
just
so much already
understand the whole
figured
process.
out. And we're
And
constantly discovering
there's
more.
still more.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. But I guess I don't have the capacity to go through with all that. So it was just more like maybe I'm just too lazy to. But it was cool though. It was really cool learning about those things. It was fun, as challenging as it was. But I understood a lot of different things about it. But that's the problem. Like I don't remember all of it, right? Like it's like at the moment of at the time of learning, it's like, oh wow, this is cool. There's all these cycles and
Yeah.
this and, but then now like not using any of it anymore. It's like I don't remember like the
Yeah,
details,
that's what
you
people
know?
complain about, like in about high school in general, that you essentially learn a bunch of stuff that you never end up using, right?
Yeah.
If you're not using it for your actual work, which is specialized, right? Your specializations mostly. You don't use the all the geometry you learn, like all the sinus and cosinus, really, like I never use any of that stuff ever. And most of things like that. So, and some of it, like most of it doesn't retain that, you know? For example, I remember in high school I learned geography and I was even tried to pass some exams because we had to choose some subjects to pass exams on. And I was passing exams specifically for geography. I remember doing some reports on history. And there was so much information, right? Because essentially it's the whole world. Like you have to know so much stuff. But at this point, I don't remember any of it. I don't remember
Yeah.
any of that. Like, so
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
details, so
There's
many
too many
countries to know
details. Yeah.
stuff about, but I don't engage with that information because I don't need to for any reasons. So it's
I mean,
very,
it's
I
like,
don't even know why we study all of that then.
I mean, there's something to be said about learning all these things as a kid to kind of broaden your horizon, you
Yeah.
know? but it's also arguable, like some of the stuff they teach you are really just, they're useless. They're not at all kind of,
Yeah, this is
especially,
why I think education should be reformed. It should be more personalized somehow. I've heard of people organizing schools. I mean, this is just singular experiments, I think. But I think there's a school out there that the kids there teach other kids. So the kids just organize their own curriculum because their natural interests guide them and they end up learning what's interesting to them, which is a whole different type of engagement. The whole thing becomes a play because you're actually doing what you're interested in. You're motivated. You're exploring. You're not learning. You're not sitting in class learning some stuff that somebody says you have to learn. You decide yourself, ooh, this is interesting. I want to learn more about this. This is a much better way, I think, because that way you cultivate this natural curiosity in a person. You just allocate time and space for it. And I think they had like really great results essentially from that system. Like it was all positive.
right.
So this is where I wish some of the things that you learn throughout life, I wish you could go back and experience childhood with the right conditions in
Yeah.
mind, like the stuff that you learn is like, I wish I learned that when I was young. Like the life would be so different if you like got the right framework and started engaging the right tools early on.
Yeah, I mean, thinking back on my life, right? It's like, yeah, there's so many mistakes. Obviously, everybody makes them, but part of it was also just the system is we're like we are this. What would you say? We are this sacrificial lamb to the inefficiency of the system that we have, right?
Hmm.
Like we're basically sacrificed for the sake of, because again, this is my conspiracy, but part of it, I think education, modern day education, at least in the West, it's definitely a. I'm not saying there's an actual force just making it this with an acute sort of agenda at this, but it's part of the whole process of brainwashing people to think that your life is about serving. So the real message is really your life is about serving corporations, right? That's what we do in the current education system. They teach you how to be obedient. They teach you how to be like and basically everything kind of is kind of catered to this as well. Is the cultural psychology. Even parents
Yeah.
teach your kids like, yeah, get a good job, right? Eventually get good grades in school, learn what you need to learn, excel at the studies, and eventually get a job, right? So that's the whole idea. I mean, it's been perpetuated so much that the whole is like a complex. It's almost like the industrial complex of churning out drones, right? People just don't think for themselves. They learn all these things and then they go out there and get a job and just be part of the cog to the machine. I think it's true. It's just kind of how the education system is formulated to kind of produce that. Now, of course, some people break away from that, but most people are just, kids. They just are learning what they are kind of compelled to learn, right? I mean, I know education is important, but it's kind of how we're doing it is really just forcing all these potentials into these set molds
Hmm.
to be utilized, right? I mean, certainly as a society, you do need capable people who can perform certain functions. That's true enough. But the problem is it's like all these kind of creative processes are being suppressed. They're not being, you don't allow people to be their fully
Yeah.
potential. It's like they basically are telling people you don't get to be who you want to be. You just have to be this and that because this earn money. This thing earn money, therefore you go to
Yeah,
do it.
this is where it goes wrong for everybody, I think, because that's not prioritized, right? That's being completely ignored. Whereas if you were to do it the other way around, that's where many more people would be happy, I think, right? Because they'd be able to use their strengths, follow their natural interests, and be in that state of flow a more amount of their time in life than not. Because, yeah, and so many people struggle with that, I believe, because I don't know. I've seen that personally in my life, right? I studied the thing that I wasn't exactly good at or that passionate about in college because I just didn't know how to choose the right thing. I literally was lost. I was like, okay, came time to choose, like look at all these subjects and how do you do it? You just look through the subjects, right? You think, okay, what do I know about this stuff? Do I want to do it? No, I guess this one. But there's no real way because you don't know what any of it entails. When you
Yeah.
read about a profession, like you don't know what it entails until you do it. This is where like I really wish there was something like a market for these jobs that you could go in as a young person and try, like a boot camp. Like you today
Yeah.
you're a technician, tomorrow you're a programmer, just so you can get some kind of an idea of what's involved, because you only get it when you try to do it. Because when you think, oh, programming is so cool, I'm going to be engineer, I'm going to be solving all these problems, critical thinking. Yeah, you're going to sit on your ass 12 hours a day and trying to like comprehend someone else's bullshit code and why it doesn't work. It's a completely different form of
Yeah.
what it is. It's not all this romanticized
And I just
version
feel
of it.
like education is too insulated, right? The system of education is insulated from society in general because what you learn in school is very different from the real world. So that's why, like, if you have more of things like where internships like are pretty powerful way to learn. And if
Hmm.
somehow they're integrated more to the with the education system, like the real world
Yeah.
companies are this is what happens in Germany actually, right? They actually have this whole thing where if you go to college, because they have two types, right? One's college, one's university. The college are more like general skills, and especially true for like things like engineering and stuff like that, where you can just get started right away, and you can have these kind of internship as you're studying to go to real companies to really work there as an intern to learn the process and stuff.
No,
And,
that's great.
and when you graduate, you basically are right able to do the job, and then you can just join the market right away. Or you can choose to go to university, which anybody can go for free, but the exit exam is so freaking hard, and
Mm.
basically not many people pass. So unless
Wow.
you really focus, like you really want to be like having a PhD in something, then that's where you go, right? But for most people, they're like, it's fine. I'll just be an engineer. I'll just be even being a plumber, like in Germany, right? I don't know about now, but it's actually these kind of jobs, you can earn a lot of money by just
Hmm.
actually doing it and learning the process. And that's the kind of the trend, right? People these days, young kids are realizing, oh, college is basically useless. So that's why they're focusing more on like practical stuff like like a trade school or something like that where you actually participate in the marketplace and get a good living, make a good living, as opposed to just like going through these studies where it's kind of divorced from the reality of the economy.
Hmm.
So that's shifting, but again, it's the kids themselves figuring it out. It's just nobody, so the system doesn't help them in that sense. Yeah, so thinking about like exactly like a lot of mistakes I made. Of course, it's not you can't really just blame the system for all your problems. Part of it is just ourselves, right? Like we didn't have the right mentality here and there to make the right decision at the time. But that's life. It's kind of like you just have to be okay with that. Like, okay, I made the mistake. I learned from that. Now I need to do better than that, right?
Yeah, it will never be quite perfect, right? There's always going to be something, some kind of friction, some kind of inefficiency and imperfection.
Which is why that's the kind of the spirit of kind of what a person should be doing. Just try different things, trial and error until you get to a point where it's you can call it somewhat of a success. That's how it happens. It's just trial and error because you don't know any of these how anything will happen, right? Or how it
Hmm.
will happen. It's all about experimentation and doing different things, like what we're doing right here. I mean, we weren't planning to start this channel, to start this podcast, to start this conversation, like this series of conversation. I mean, we were doing it before, but we didn't formalize it or didn't think about it in such a way. But this is experimentation. Who knows, right? So it's just you have to try all kinds of things, and then that's part of the life. This excitement kind of is generated by that, and not just because you know what will happen. Because like you're saying, right? If you know what will happen, that's boring. And part of the excitement is not knowing. It's like, oh, is this gonna work somehow? Like you don't know, but that's fine. It's just how things are, right? You just kind of engage with the world in whichever way that works for you, and you see what happens, right? So it's kind of like have a plan, but basically wing it. You know,
Yeah, do your best.
it's I'm doing my best with this. It's like That's just what happens. Okay. I didn't plan for this, but if you start thinking, if the universe actually, if you start thinking that universe owes you peace and quiet, then you're wrong. You can't decide this. Some people decide to do this. That's their life, right? That's their kind of like, they need this somehow. I don't need this, but this is kind of how you get, this is life. You learn with it. You get to, get used to it. It's like, yep, you're going to be dealing with all kinds of, problems, quote unquote
Yeah,
problems.
you gotta roll with it. You were talking about biology earlier, and it reminded me. I recently was watching a video from some guy who was essentially talking about DNA, and he was just trying to explain some stuff about DNA. It's maybe like 45 or an hour long video, but essentially it paints the picture of how much there is to know. That if you keep talking for an hour, it's like a lecture essentially, right? An hour of time is a lecture, but how little you'd be able to explain by talking for an hour, with visuals and everything about DNA, and it only just gives you an idea of what's involved. But even by that, I was so impressed that I was like, Jesus Christ, the complexity of what's going on inside of you, on all these levels, in all these cells, all these little mechanisms, all these little proteins and their variations. And his point was to paint the picture to such a degree that you understand the scale of complexity. Some of the things that he mentioned was that some protein that is involved in some little operation in some small part of the cell in some cases, right? Just some small infinitesimal part. He said that there are more variations of that protein than there are like atoms in the world or something. Just that alone, right? And it's one of the billions of other parts and mechanisms and points. There's essentially a whole world, right? It's like a factory down there and on a cellular level where the DNA is involved in constructing all these mechanisms, responding to changes, making repairs, making temporary bridges that are like one is protein is transporting something over the bridge to cross the cell. In the meantime, other cells like disassembling the bridge right after it in the
Right.
real time.
Yeah.
Just mind-blowing stuff. And you start seeing that complexity, and the question you arise like, how does this all work together simultaneously at the same time? So because it's like we haven't understood the whole picture, right? There's just endless amount of stuff to study, like similar to how we explore space. Sometimes scientists look at some system and then like bodies rotate in a specific way and they don't exactly know why, because they're not seeing like all the forces that should be producing that type of behavior. So same way in the study of DNA, in certain cases, like scientists don't know how certain parts or certain proteins or whatever, why they're doing their work, because something is supposed like to signal to them when they're supposed to be engaged, and they can't detect anything that would like communicate to those parts that they need, like this is the time for them to engage. So there's a lot of these baffling still mysteries about how these mechanisms work. It has just fascinated me to such a degree that you just start thinking about like how in the world would that come together like this, for all of these little things to work in concert like that. It's just mind-boggling. It's just impressed me so much.
Yeah,
And that's just DNA.
yeah, and the question is it consciously doing that, right? It's like these are just
Yeah.
supposed to be just
What is that?
information. Protein, the way that they fold it, form a kind of a specific shape, right? So, but it works all in tandem. So what does that mean about the fundamental aspect of life? Like, does that mean that who's making the command? Who's saying,
Yeah.
okay, you got to do this. You got to combine with this thing and make
Yeah,
this
what's
stuff,
the driving force?
right? Even though you can say, yes, DNA is the code and the protein are reading them for the instructions, but then who formed the instruction? How is the instruction being formed, right? These kind of like, how does
And
it
the fact that
organize?
yeah, exactly. Like the fact how they describe the structure of DNA, that it is essentially a 3D book that you can read in any direction. You can read it, how the regular book and you just read like left to right. So in DNA, you can read left to right to left, then through the pages vertically, back and forth. So vertically,
Right.
right? And then so essentially in all kinds of ways. but you can't even comprehend how to encode information that way, that it's meaningful in all possible directions. It's some kind of algorithm that packed it so compactly that is brilliant. Like essentially, it's perfect. Human could not design a system like that because we're not smart enough to understand how to arrange all these little parts in such a way that they can be read as meaningful pieces of an instruction in all of those ways. How does that happen? It's insane.
And the fact that you can actually modify it, right? Gene therapy and stuff like that, you can make the thing actually happen.
Right.
And this is where cloning is a thing, right? You're able to do it mechanically. In theory, you can do it because you can alter how these gene expression happens, and it will code a certain thing. So eventually, basically, the idea is that if humans allow this to happen, then you can literally just code how you want your baby to look like, or to what kind of
what traits to have.
what trait to have. You can essentially do that, if you choose to do it. So meaning, these things are, they have the code. You can alter the code. You can manipulate the code and have it expressed a certain way. But how does this code itself come together, right? This is the whole basically chicken and egg problem of evolution. It's like, okay, is it intelligent design? Is it just kind of thing come to being? Abiogenesis.
Well, that was essentially my gut reaction when I was seeing that information laid out that way. I'm like, I don't see how it can come together without intelligent design. I just don't see it, because imagine the most complex construction or thing that we humans created. It doesn't come close. Like in the scale and complexity and efficiency of how it functions, we haven't made anything like that. It's incredibly complex. It's beyond anything that we can design or conceive of.
Yeah, I mean,
how would it just randomly combine like that?
I mean, it's like either way, it's a mystery, because even if you say that you believe in evolution and that these things did come about just randomly, even then, what is the mechanism that kind of, it's basically what's the nature of reality that
I think even in that same video, they were essentially saying that that's another part of the mystery, is that for certain bits of those structures, it's not clear from which evolution they appeared. They don't seem to have any, like, there's no evolutionary steps that they could detect for certain parts to appear. Like, we don't know where they came from. So that's another little red flag that, like, where do these things come from? Because there's enzymes and there are proteins, and the enzymes, it's a whole separate world of the amount of variations and where they came from, etc. Even if there are some kind of mutations that evolved throughout time, we simply don't even have enough information or evidence to track them, like how they evolved through time. So many mysteries in this whole study.
Yeah, so exactly those detailed instructions, it comes about in such complex ways. I remember in biology, we had to learn from cell details, even just the cell itself. That's already confusing enough. You want to start learning the details about it.
Yeah, there's so much
and
stuff
then
going on
there are
there.
there are tissues, organs, and then, as you go up,
Hormones,
it's just the whole, exactly, right? The whole system.
Neurotransmitters.
And just make you think, oh wow, like this is almost ridiculous. How the hell is it, and why does it form that way?
Such
Does
an
it need
insanely complex system.
does it need to form into that, right? The compulsion. Is there really a need for that to happen, right? Who's informing that this has to be a thing?
Yeah, like what are the rules? What's the driving rules there?
One could think that, just the fact that we have because sometimes, I think about it, sodium chloride is salt. So we have sodium, we have chloride, put it together as salt. It's like magic, right?
Yeah.
But somehow these things can form. So basically in chemistry, essentially we already figured out more or less what all the possible combinations could be, right? Throughout the history of chemistry, people have been putting things together. And it's like, oh, instantly we put this together, it forms something. So that reaction is just almost naturally encoded in the chemistry itself, meaning almost like that's the expression of the language of the universe. Like that's just how it works.
Yes.
There's no kind of like figuring it out. It's just like it just works that way. It's just
that's what it
this
does.
and this, and then you form this, right? So we just humans are finding out that this is how it is. So I guess you could say you can extend that with same with the how the cells, how those instruction DNA, it might even be the same idea that somehow these processes are kind of, I don't know if it's correct to say, innate to the way of the world somehow, like it's just
Again, it's just
naturally
the
came
metaphor
about.
is that they're like they seem to be programmed to be that way, right? They have those properties already,
Yeah,
and we
but
can't trace any origin to any of it. We don't know what comes first, right? What is the thing that started it all?
yeah, so it's almost like magical. Yeah, it's like, wow, these things work, you know, and it works to the point. I mean, to all the magics of human biology, and we have and yet we have so many dumb things that happens in society. Like it's just like, oh wow, they're given all this ability to experience life, and some people choose it in a certain way that's just like, I don't know, man.
Well, that's where it's the fun to think about this freedom of choice, right? Like the free will to engage in the dumbest stuff you can possibly think of, or spend your life studying physics. Like we have all of it. We have every gradation of those decisions available throughout the history. Like, people people choose to do such different things. It still boggles my mind that we have everything essentially, such variation.
And that's the, I guess that's the part we should celebrate about, you know, like life is just like, yeah, it's very, that's the exciting part of it. It's just different. Nothing is as it seems, nothing is as you would think it would be, and that's part of how one need to navigate life, you know? I think that's all I have to say about the topic at hand.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about that because we're talking about biology, we were talking about the uh, how we go through life, the fact that in childhood we have the different predispositions, different talents. Yeah, the math, the whole math topic. Yeah, see, like sometimes like we jump so many different topics, but by the way it works, kind of just the stuff comes to mind, right? Just like this topic reminded me of this. This is what I learned or experienced recently about that. So that's how it's been stringing along for me lately. But if we go back to the beginning of the podcast, one of the things that I was thinking about the whole Gangsta party line is how it's connected to humor, because all of these topics they're kind of recurring. Like we're just generally interested in the same type of things, like with the philosophy and spirituality and humor. And humor is big part of it, because I still like that one of the big meditations for me is just thinking about what humor is and what we find humorous, because so much of this stuff is it's kind of unconscious. I think humor is some kind of the touch point between the conscious and subconscious, you know? Because like when you laugh about something, you don't really think about why you're laughing, right? It's kind of just a reaction, and only later, like if you analyze it, you can understand like, okay, this thing is poignant and this thing is interesting. But when something truly funny happens in moment, it's pretty much unconscious. Like you just laugh, right? You have this pleasant emotion plus some kind of, I feel like it's an energetic release as well, that because like laughing takes energy, you know?
Hmm.
As
Yeah.
you remember, like if you have like a laughing fit, eventually like you're
You
winded.
get tired.
Yeah, it was like, oh, Jesus, like it
This is
takes
just make you
energy out of you.
stop.
Yeah, it's very interesting that it's kind of like this energetic process as well. But yeah, I still don't really understand what humor is. Like I don't get it. I don't know what it is. Like even though obviously engage in so much of it, watch so many stand-up comedians, and these days I realize that I'm enjoying watching stand-up comedians not just to see like yeah exactly their jokes. I just really appreciating the art, the art form. Then like because I'm watching for what they're doing.
Right.
I like it even watching the crowd work and the improv, because it's like it's fascinating because it's in real time. People are being creative, right? There's
Yeah.
nothing more as creative in real time as doing some proper funny crowd work or improv. And this aspect of improv is very interesting to me as well, because to be funny in real time, like just on the dime, right? Just on the second something happens, like a good comedian can make a funny comment. That's, I don't know, that's like akin to magic, pretty much. Because as well, again, like what is happening there? Like what is that ability?
I mean, this is the part where these comedians have to have a lot of life experience, essentially,
Yeah,
or at
yeah.
least they have to have a good way of kind of,
Exposure to culture.
yeah, exactly. So they can just on the dime, they can be like,
They
take
can
that and
connect all these
spin with it,
references.
right?
That's
It's
what it is,
it's
yeah.
right. So especially when some of these guys are like, yeah, they're like very cultured. They know a lot of stuff. That's why they're able to just on a dime make fun of a certain situation. Because like, I mean, for the uninformed, for people who don't know more about these things, they can't form a joke right there and then and there. You don't have the connections. You can't make it, like it's also you got to make it funny by just I don't know whether just within the because the joke is like I don't know, it's a structured way of um. I mean, you're
It's
poking.
a present and a perspective. That's what I notice a lot. That is, it presents a certain perspective, and perspective is kind of ridiculous and funny because it's either it's always pretty much true, like what they're saying,
Yeah,
and it's a certain type of perception. So this comedian's mind works in a specific way where it's like it's hunting out these perspectives, which if you present them and the perspective is funny enough and the way of you presenting it is funny enough, which again, funny is what it's unusual, I guess, unusual, right? It's unusual enough, or it's so radically honest that people don't expect to hear it voiced. And that's what it is, I think. It's so there's always this aspect of radical honesty in comedy, especially in Western stand up, like when I first started experiencing it, the concept of roasts was very foreign to me. Because when I was watching it, I was like, this is insane. This is just people insulting each other. Because I've never seen anything like that before that, right? And then I kind of watched it and like, okay, I get it. I kind of get what they're doing. It's funny. It is funny, but it's a specific way of doing it because for the roast to be good, for it to be funny, it does have to be based on reality.
yeah, it has to be
Even
true,
though like
more or
people
less.
sometimes say egregious stuff, the only way people will, because you can just come out as like you're an asshole. It doesn't work. Like you have to tie it to something real about the person, about the way they conduct themselves, or what their history, or something about them, where you do put them down. And an ideal roast is where you put them down, but somehow make it wholesome, the whole thing. That's like the top level, because I've seen some comedians do it that way, because you can definitely be like too aggressive and with these roasts. Like I see like this is like uncomfortable. Like they're way too aggressive because they go for the jugular. Like they point out some kind of, they take a weakness or something, they make fun of the person, and to me it just feels like it's too mean. Like I don't like that aspect of it. But if you find a way to kind of make fun of it or ridicule where you almost give a person like an underhanded compliment in some way, but like, oh, how unique they are, I find those are the best ones because they feel like the most masterful, because it combines this ability with showing this raw perspective with some kind of charismatic tact or something where you're not stepping over the line too far. This is a very social thing. Like it's both social commentary and the sense and the good habits of not stepping over that line too much and hurting people.
Yeah, although sometimes I do feel like it's kind of go over the line, but
I
that's
know.
just personal taste, right? I guess. So some people like it's yeah, it's just why jokes are subjective too. It's just some
Yeah,
people think it's fine, some people say, oh, that is egregious. This is not.
I know. That's the fun. That's what makes it kind of like really interesting to comedy too, because I think people are drawn to that. People are drawn to like, ooh, this is some raw, honest, radical stuff. Myself, I don't know how I'd be able to take such stuff because I mean, there's plenty of material on me. Like if one wanted to roast me, like that would be a lot. Where like if I were to hear it, I'm not sure if I'd be able to take it well because it's like a test on how comfortable you are with being who you are also too, because some
Yeah.
people are less comfortable than others. And I personally know people who will never, like, will not be able to get it. Like, I know a friend of mine that she can't take any criticism in a joking fashion at all. Because sometimes I would do it, you poke fun at somebody and you make a joke out of something, and I'm clearly joking, but she would still get like emotion, like very visibly offended. It's like, what do you mean? Like, I'm obviously joking. Like, why are you reacting to it this way? Like, it's obviously I'm playing, and still she wouldn't be able to take it, like, even in joke, So it's very interesting that how some people take themselves much more seriously, than others that way, where it's, to me, it's like you have this image of yourself then that you think is so real that others like can hurt or something. But that's not the case, really. You're not you're not this combination of all these little factoids and historical situations about you. You hold it yourself together as an idea, but it doesn't really exist anywhere else outside your head.
So again, that kind of goes back to the whole discussion of ego, right? Some people have more of that, or at least they're not, their egos are not tempered enough that they have this kind of conception of themselves, and somehow because of that ego are telling them this cannot be assaulted. You cannot make fun of me because this is paradoxically,
Yeah,
it's funny, right?
they
It's like
take it.
just because they have that big ego, therefore it feels that it cannot be
Well, this is like,
criticized in any
if
way.
comedians like smell that, they go for it like sharks on blood. Because
Yeah,
like in crowd work, you see it. This
exactly.
is essentially, it's a classic thing, right? Some either entitled or some heckler
Yeah,
with
yeah,
a strong opinion who think about themselves too much, then they get dismantled every single time. You
yeah,
never see a heckler who outsmarts the comedian. It's hilarious,
yeah.
and people still come to it, and somehow it keeps happening, which I think it's literally a good demonstration of how these egos that essentially pop out is like, no, I know better than this, I'm smarter than you, because it's that at the root of it. And it's hilarious that it keeps happening, and comedians, they're so seasoned in it, right? Because they've encountered so many times that they literally trained to deal with it. It's like going against a professional, in their industry, and trying to outsmart them while not being a professional in that industry. It's not going to work. They're specialists. They specialize in diffusing silly people like you, because essentially that's the judo that they know. That's their art form. You will not be able to go to toe with them, because essentially they have an answer for everything. Because anything you can say to them, they'll turn it around
Yeah,
and ridicule you, because that's
yeah.
a skill that they have. It's like a Zen master thing, You're going to be able to, you think it can tell me anything that is going to either defeat me or make me uncomfortable, and they turn it around on you, and you're defeated. You can't do anything about it because
Because,
you're
part of it,
defenseless.
I think, is that everybody is a hypocrite, right? Like we say certain things and then we do it another way. So like basically, I'm not saying this is the only way, but part of it is these comedians are finding these aspects of what's not true about you, right? From what
Hmm.
you're saying,
Right.
you
Yeah,
act
that's true. It's a big,
basically
big
you say
mechanism.
one thing and you act another. Who's the hypocrite here, right? So they just play around with that, and somehow
Hmm.
it's funny how these things actually happen. Where some of these heckling, like when the comedian turn it around, it's so perfect that it's almost like a setup, almost like this is
It's
intentionally,
exactly.
you
It's a
know?
setup, and in a lot of these crowd work or heckling situations, like if comedian kind of specializes in that, I noticed the effect is literally like therapeutic in some cases. I think the guy that is famous for it is Stavros Halkias.
Okay, yeah,
Is the guy, I know you don't like him because he's kind of over the top with his laugh and everything. He's kind of obnoxious, but his crowd work is pretty up there. Essentially, he just asks like people in the audience something like, "Yeah, what's going on here?" And every single time, there's some kind of guy that says something that is just like a
yeah.
setup, like the perfect setup that you couldn't wish for a more perfect scenario to like be given to you as a comedian to work with, right? And he immediately starts just making fun of it right away. And every time you would think like these people that know in his audience that know better, it's like they're not aware of what they're saying. They think like in their mind it sounds cool,
Right.
but he immediately dismantles it and it's like essentially throws it back in their face. Like, what are you doing with your life? Like you're all your decisions are bad. You're terrible. You're a moron.
See, but
It
that's
throws it in their face. It's
but
so funny.
the thing, right? Most people don't take the time to think about their own actions even, right? They think in a certain way because they think, oh, this is cool because I feel this particular way about the situation or something like that. Because somehow nobody point out the flaw in their thinking, right?
It's like you need to see the bigger picture. You need to kind of zoom out and see that you're there and this is the situation and you're dealing with with this and this is your motivation. But that's a high level of self-awareness, I think, right? For
Yes.
example, and it's one of the recent clips that I saw him is I was asking about the guy what he separated with his wife, so they don't live together anymore, and he has a child with her. And the comedian, he was trying to like ascertain, okay, what happened, right? Like, what's the story? Why did you separate? And he's like, well, we're from different cities and states. He's like, okay, but what happened? Why did you separate? Like, well, she's Latina.
Hmm?
And he's like, yeah, but you're just naming facts right now, right? You're just what is the reason that you're not together raising your child with this woman? And no matter how he tried
Wow.
to ask him, the guy essentially wasn't naming the reason. So either he is so completely unconscious and unaware of like what the hell is he doing with his life that he's not with a woman with whom he has a child, so what's going on there? Or the reason is so obscene that he's not willing to share it. But either way, you can see that like there's a real cognitive dissonance that is happening in that guy because the comedian is actively making fun of the fact that yeah, it's just a straight up question like what happened? Why did you leave essentially? Were you not able to overcome the cultural shock of moving from one US town to another US town? And he could not find that out. It was so hilarious because essentially it's food for thought for that guy. Because what's the problem, right? Why is he not with this woman raising his child? What's the actual reason? And to me, like it's literal therapy at that point because he is bringing his awareness and his attention to this, and he kind of forces him to think it through. And it kind of turns out that the guy never really thought it through. So whatever reason that it happened, the whole separation, whatever, it's essentially either illegitimate or it's unacknowledged or it's like there's something that doesn't add up there, right? So and I find it's like, wow, this is so interesting because it totally works as therapy at that point, not
It
just
is.
comedy.
It is. It's a form of therapy, It's
Yeah.
because you're confronting the person in this manner. Like you're confronting them with their problems. It's like, hey, are you seeing yourself in the mirror? Like
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
what's
What's
happening to
going
you.
on, buddy?
Okay, like so in a more crude manner than say in a therapy session where they actually, you know, trying to be
But
nice
this
to
is
you
what's
about it.
so kind of therapeutic and valuable to it because in a comedian who is raw and unhinged essentially and aggressive like that, he disregards all the rules, right? He literally is like a jester in the courtroom, right? Because he's just saying what he's seeing. He calls a spade a spade. And then you can't do nothing because he has the license to it. He's the only one with the mic. He's gonna overshout anybody, and you paid your money to be there, so he has the carte blanche. He can say and do whatever he wants. And
Yeah.
in there's been variations in the comedy climate throughout the years, but I mean these days we're pretty much back to being on the all-time good levels. People are saying whatever they want on stage these days.
I think it's returning. The cultural shift right now is happening again, right? Like it's shifting back to the how it was and how it's supposed to be. You can actually start these kind of being free to just make criticisms and and all these comments is fine because it never was a problem until these kind of woke sort of DEI whatever things come about where it becomes this kind of the these ideologies are kind of brainwashing people in believing all these kind of ways to kind of categorize themselves, and you had this whole kind of basically no free speech. You can't say this, you can't say that, you can't criticize this or that. Yeah, I think that's people had enough, right? People had enough of this BS, and then now it's turning back because this is the natural state of things, right? You need to come back to the reality, practical
To
reality.
me, it goes back to essentially to honesty being the crucial factor in the whole enterprise of comedy. Because if you're not able to talk about certain things, why? That undermines the whole concept of essentially it's honest communication, right? Because even when you're making a joke, you're it's still subjective. It definitely is. That's why like many comedians they have to reiterate, hey, like some of these things are jokes in the sense of that they're completely made up, a scenario, right? Some of them are just points of view and perspectives, which is just, of course, they're going to be subjective and they paint it from a specific points of view. But what is wrong with that? Why would somebody point of view would be invalid? There's no such case. So this is what the comedy is good for, is that we can riff with these ideas, and even they're nonsense or stupid, that will be filtered out. Like, for example, if you start doing stand-up comedy, the way you do it is you go to open mics and you say what you think is funny, and then you will be given feedback, and then you fine-tune. You find how you can be funny in your way.
Because I
And
think,
actually, something that I noticed that all the good comedians, they're good in their own unique way. They only everybody has their own little style. Like if you make it in comedy, if you
right.
become like more or less successful, think about it. Like think about any comedian. They all have a very unique way of how they're being funny.
Yeah, that's their personality. Yeah. But I think in general, people do seek the truth, whatever that really means. But people have this
Not
tendency.
everybody, apparently.
Well, see, the thing is, I think everybody does. Even if they kind of tell themselves that they don't, or they justify it as like, oh, I tell lies because, you know, I try to make my life better by scamming other people, blah blah blah. But in truth, I mean, yes, some people do horrible things, right? They do horrible things, they justify in whatever way. But I think ultimately everybody does have this kind of impulse for the truth, because you wouldn't you want the truth from other people? You would, right? But obviously, we're dealing with a lot of obfuscations in life. You know, people lie about certain things, they obscure the true intent and stuff like that because it benefits people to lie sometimes, right? And it's for some people it's easier for lie to lie than to tell the truth. And we all know also that truth hurts, right? The truth is sometimes it's because things aren't always as rosy, you know. But I think we fundamentally want that because for society, not just for society to work, but for each of us from our own perspective, like we want to know the real deal. Everybody wants that, even though we might not want to face the reality, but we do want it. I think subconsciously we all have that. So comedy in this sense is a form of that, almost as a therapy to find out the truth about certain things. And sometimes you have to cross the line to get that because naturally people don't socially they don't like that, right? They don't like being criticized for for who you are or for whatever. But through that setting of a stand-up comedy, the comedian had the license to do so, and therefore it's almost like they say, right? You bought a front sit ticket, so if you get roasted, that's your problem. Like don't sit up front if you don't want to get roasted. But people still do it because it's like it's fun for them, right? They're like, hey, I want to see what they will say about me, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a form of I mean, and also that takes some guts too for even the hecklers. It's like to be in that
Yeah.
position, to be able to be vulnerable in a way, right? It's like,
Yeah, because they're going to be singled out. You're
yeah,
going to
you're
be
standing
like,
out. So
a comedian was essentially will swoop on you like a hawk, if they really choose to, like dig into you. Because I've seen that many of times. And some people are so much better at taking it too. Because
yeah,
if they just laugh at themselves, like that's the ideal case, right? Because then they kind of provided some context for this uh, improv joke and they didn't cause any problems. But as soon as anybody starts taking them too seriously or taking like interaction seriously, it's so silly because essentially you're so self-centered that you think like everything revolves around you. But you're in a comedy show. People just wanted to like have a good time. Like nobody cares about what your situation is. Like nobody even cares what if any of it is real. Like nobody knows you.
yeah. So
And the concept of improv is also like so interesting in comedy because when you watch comedians work, together, essentially, you can see how essentially it's a skill that you have as a comedian for sure. You can develop it separately, improvisation, but all of them, like if you've been around comedy and you work with other comics a little bit, this is the basic skill that you essentially, when another person is trying to make a bit out of something like in the real time, right? You're supposed to go along with it. That's the main premise of improv. I remember it because I actually went to a few improv random classes events on Meetup back in the day, a
Yeah.
long time ago, because I thought it's kind of a good idea. And I still think that way because that's actually, you get to do something, right? So you're not standing awkwardly, like having to make conversation with something, but you still get to meet people and do some, social activities with them. But essentially, it's just one fun big game where you're kind of trying to be creative based on certain scenarios, on circumstances, and it's pretty fun. But this idea to go along with the thing, like, it's very interesting seeing it in real time in comedians because essentially one guy starts bullshitting, right? And the other guy immediately, like, he
Yeah.
picks up on it, like, okay, I see what he's doing, and he plays along, like he amplifies it, or he like adds to it, like, yeah, it's like, yeah, we go to this place, and like he essentially immediately participates in this world building scenario with him right away, and it's so cool to see because it's the ultimate playfulness essentially because you're seeing like, okay, this person wants to play this scenario, I'll play it with him. And when it's done so openly and supportively, really cool things happen. When you literally see two people not planning make a really funny joke in real time in front of you, it's so cool. It literally feels like magic because they just kind of like, you know summoned it into existence just in real time out of
Yeah.
nowhere. One of the comedians that kind of specializes in that is Rory Scovel. I've seen him once in Toronto. I specifically went to see him perform. But his big thing was that when he was starting out comedy, he was equally interested in both improv and comedy. So he was taking kind of courses and classes on both. And because he was just that into both of those. And he, ever since then, he would kind of try to see how he can most effectively combine the two, because that's kind of the art form that he wanted to pursue, almost like a subgenre of comedy, where it's so heavily based on improv that it's something unique. And that, yeah, it directly translates into his comedy style because sometimes he just does a lot of improv in his bits and his communications with the audience. And I think one of the gigs he's done, I recently watched it on YouTube, is he booked a show, like a week long, where he does a show every night without the prepared material.
Hmm.
So it's a comedian where audience comes, people pay money, but he prepared no material. And his job is to entertain them
Just
and be funny with nothing, dude.
wow.
That's a challenge that he set for himself, and he was great at it. Like because he's developed it, in combination with his personality and everything else. He does it very, very nicely. He essentially just being ridiculous, right? Like his style is that what ridiculous scenario he can paint to the most outrageous degree, and it works. It works a lot, and it's all so kind of raw and honest because, depending on how you feel that day, it's going to go differently. Sometimes you're going to be more creative. Sometimes you're going to be more expressive. Sometimes you're going to be more dramatic. But to do all, like, you have to be so on it all those times because you have to perform, right? You have to actively, like, try and make it funny somehow based on nothing's happening. So I find that guy is very, very funny and unique just that way alone because he's trying to include so much improv into his comedy style. Are there any comedians that you particularly appreciate?
Man, just so much varied.
So
Like,
many, right?
yeah, so many. Like, I mean, I don't not any particular. Like, I mean, I just randomly whatever I find on YouTube, really. Um, yeah, some of them are quite funny. Some of them are, I don't know, maybe just everybody's level of, I mean, level of humor is very different, right? What you find funny, what you find, I often do find that most of the stuff I could have a chuckle, but it's
Mhm.
very hard for me to be like just dying of
Yeah.
laughter. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
really happen to me. I don't know why. It's not. I know some people are like they're basically are just dying of laughter
Yeah.
for certain jokes. I'm like,
There's a general
really?
level of
It's like
emotionality, I think.
I didn't find that funny. But like, yeah,
Mm.
it's funny, but not to the level of, But yeah, so everybody's level of what they find funny is different. But yeah, it's yeah.
For me, it's like I gauge it by how consistently a comics bits can make me laugh, and for that, like the winners for me are Louis C.K. for sure. Like I can watch even his old stuff. I watch, and it's just consistently funny. That means it's like stands the test of time. When something is funny, it means that it's perfected essentially, right? He definitely crafts his jokes, right? He distills them into like it's a funny scenario no matter what. Him and from the new guys, it's Ari Mehdi. He's just
Oh yeah.
consistently funny as well, right? Just always ridiculous, fun stuff with his cultural juxtapositions. It's very funny. It's very expressive. It's great. Consistently funny as well. Have you watched much of George Carlin before?
Oh, just the classic bits. Not consistently, but yeah, basically it's like, I mean, it's too true, man. It's not even funny at that point. It's like it's too
Yeah.
true. It's like this is too much reality.
Again, like a
But
league of his own, right? It's like
yeah,
his own genre where it's just so smart and so aware that it's a different type of comedy. Really, at that point, it's more of a PSA, in a
yeah,
lot of ways. And I definitely like a lot of all of his like later stuff when he was already old, because that's where all the wild stuff was definitely started happening in the world, and he was like started pointing out those things, and couldn't yeah, everybody was just the response to him was crazy. People really loved him. And before him, you had Bill Hicks, just also a lot of fairly good amount of unhinged stuff in his material. Very just I, I don't even know what it is. It's a performance for sure, but also there's some kind of like philosophical backbone that you can feel,
mm,
underneath the whole thing. Where so some of the comedians, they're kind of sharing their worldview. They're raising questions about culture and values and norms and just philosophical questions. It's very interesting. So in some ways, comedians are modern day philosophers as well.
they are. Yeah, that's a way to make it approachable, right? Because otherwise, if you talk about philosophy in general, people are like, what
It's
are you talking
detached.
about? We don't have the lexicon for that. Right? People have to learn the terms and all that to understand it. But in a comedy, and you make it as a joke, and then you understand, oh yeah, this is what he's saying. I mean, everybody gets what's philosophy, the fundamental philosophy. People get it, I think. But the
It's,
language
it's
in
mostly kind
itself,
of is questioning, right? The philosophy is kind of just asking questions. A lot of it.
yeah, it's just more of a you made it, you term it in a specific way, build a model of try to understand what it is. But that takes obviously you need to learn the language or what that
Yeah, there's
means.
a lot of mechanism
So,
to it.
which is why if you read those classical philosophical texts, it's very hard to get into
Oh
it
yeah,
because it's like it's so dense. Like they use specific languages, kind of expression, different kind of expressions or specific expressions, and then you're like you have to learn that first before you try to
yeah,
understand
yeah.
what they're referring to. It's try to read it back in college, some of the text, but it's just I couldn't get
It's
through it.
so dense and so much to it. Yeah, that's what kind of deterred me from studying any classical philosophy in a more or less, because I would look up some recommendations in terms of how you would, in what order you would need to get acquainted with these works, right? Because like some philosophers were based on philosophers before them, etc. So some of these ideas evolved through times and eras and different philosophers, and some of the ideas are based on previous ideas. So essentially, it would be good to get acquainted in them in certain order so you can understand how the thought evolved, because it's been an evolution of thought through philosophy through all this years. But essentially, it's too much of it, right? It's kind of like learning a whole science or a whole new religion, a whole new language where you need to learn so many things in order to. The question is, in order to what? Also.
And it evolves too, right? It evolves
Yep.
so much with it because I was recently getting into an actual trying to get into Marxism, like what Karl Marx actually is trying to say. Like, because I never
Yeah,
formally
his actual
study it.
works.
I never formally kind of got into it. I just have this
Yeah,
general idea of what he's trying to talk,
same
what he's
here.
talking about. So I started to kind of try to find some materials and try. I'm still in the process of doing that, but in general, from the gist of what I got into, it's like it's very interesting because essentially, like what you're saying, it's an evolution of philosophical thoughts because he's combining some of Hegel's thought, which is that the history is all about the push and pull of ideas. So that's
Hmm.
his generally speaking, like see a dialectic is talking about how the history are moved by ideas, right? Different ideas formulate different kind of how society think about themselves and what they're trying to accomplish, and there are going to be different ideas kind of conflicting among each other. So that's the kind of the push and pull force. And I think Marx in general essentially is trying to posit this idea of historical materialism, so basically meaning that all of history, what happens is actually based on the material reality. So it's
Mm.
not purely ideas. So the idea is kind of based on the material reality the society exists in. So I think basically his idea is very meta. It's very meta in terms like, oh, you think that this is the development of these enlightenment ideas or whatever. You think that people just came out of their heads? No, like it's basically based on the reality of the economics, the actual political structure, the thing that people were experiencing at that time, right? So it's these kind of movements generating, being informed by how people are living. So, and this is encapsulated what happens in Russia. Essentially, the revolution happened because people realized, yeah, he's right. This is like where the reality of what we're living through, it's informed by the different classes, different classes of people, by how much wealth they can generate and who's controlling the lever of that generation.
Hmm.
So, and they start realizing, oh yeah, we're in this class. We're the working class. We're being exploited by these, not because Marx just pointed out that the structure, right? The structure of these modern societies that happens is the industrialized society are exploiting the working class for the benefit of the ruling class. That's just kind of how the structure is, right? So then these people actually took it to heart. Like, yeah, he's right. This is our reality is based on this kind of system that's in place. And that system, in this case, they feel that it's basically unfair and something got to change because it's the exploitation. So the idea is just generally he's saying whatever you think about history is really based on the actual material, like how wealthy are the people, how well off are they, what are the social hierarchies, right? That determines that these type of ideas can be brought to the surface. So it's not just like a whole bunch of philosophers just start thinking about these ideas and all of a
Right. It's never
sudden they're
divorced from
popular and
actual
then people
reality and
just
environment.
went with it, and then this is a whole movement generated out of the material, like the actual existential sort of like what do people eat, how do they get food, how do they, and so the entire political system is informed by that as well. So the economy, politics, and everything, this whole thing informs civilization's history and how that would unfold. So anyway, that's generally the idea the gist of it that I got. So I'm very curious to see kind of some of the more detailed analysis that he's putting forth. But obviously, it's an important piece of work. This is why it's so influential, and we're still talking about it these days, right? But that's the extent of the philosophical endeavors I'm getting into lately. But yeah, it's been a while, man. Not since I was in college, where I was more interested in finding out about these philosophical readings. But yeah.
Yeah. The Marxist stuff remind me about this conversations I saw that was kind of exploring the idea of why the management and the management echelons, the leader echelons of companies and workforces get paid so much more than the workers who are doing the work. Because when you analyze the which people in the company are essential to the company, the most essential are the workers who do the work. So the line people, essentially, right? And everybody else, like the layer above them, maybe like a middle manager that manages the line people, is also important, because without that first layer of people and the second layer of middle managers, the work will not be done, because they're the actual physical people who do the physical work. And then less important, the higher managers and then directors and everybody else, in terms of how essential they are to the work being done. And that kind of puts the whole paradigm of who is valued how on its head, because, well, if the fact is that if you take out the workers away from the company, then they're the most valuable ones. But the compensation is inverse. The compensation is that the least essential people get the most money paid to them. And they were exploring the idea of why that is. And the only reason is that those people who are higher up, they're the ones designing the compensation system. That's the only reason. So unless you change that, that's the only reason it's happening that way. So if we had some kind of way to say, if the people who are working on the line, the first layer of people, were the ones in charge of designing the compensation system, it essentially would be more fair. But it never really works that way, because think about it like when you're starting a company. If you start a company, you're the boss. And if you hire a bunch of people to work under you, you have to pay them, but you're not going to pay them like an equal percentage of what you owe, because you're trying to maximize your own profits, right? And essentially, you're not incentivized to pay more to other people.